subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
After Shirahoshi. I'll be back in 3 minutes, Robin instructed before heading into the Pokémon Island to find Dak. Dak had been at the entrance of the Alliance base, planning the layout of the Pokémon Academy and its surroundings. Hearing Robin mention Shirahoshi's name, Dak's expression turned peculiar. He had considered Fishman Island when he first arrived in the One Piece world, but had since been too busy to pursue it. Fishman Island, huh? That's good. Dak thought about its unique location and current situation, smiling. Many inhabitants of Fishman Island hoped to move to the surface, but human acceptance was a major hurdle. Despite Queen Odoheim's efforts, it was a distant dream. The world government's approval didn't guarantee other humans wouldn't harm the fishmen and mermaids. The world government wasn't an official organization and couldn't make decisions for all humans, only influencing a few allied nations. Given human nature, moving to the surface would only hasten their demise, as pirates and slavers would exploit them. Odoheim's intentions were noble, wishing for her people to live under the sun and children to explore the world. However, she underestimated the hostility humans had towards other races. Fishman Island couldn't achieve equal status in the One Piece world. But Dak's smile hinted at a solution. In the One Piece world, it's impossible, but on Pokémon Island, it can work. End of Chapter 124. Chapter 124. The mainstream style of the future Pokémon Island must align with that of the Pokémon world. This is an absolute necessity. Dak must ensure that Pokémon Island becomes a worry-free, relatively peaceful world similar to the Pokémon world. If it deviates from this, he will deploy the strongest forces in the store to eliminate any disruptive elements. However, this world is more diverse and vibrant than the Pokémon world. The Pokémon world is centered around humans and Pokémon, while Pokémon Island encompasses various races and Pokémon. Therefore, all the inhabitants of Fishman Island can become permanent residents of Pokémon Island. When they give birth to the next generation, those children will be considered native residents of Pokémon Island. Similarly, Pokémon Island offers the peace that the residents of Fishman Island desire. While complete peace is unattainable and minor conflicts between different races are inevitable, there will be no incidents of human trafficking. Slave traders will find no place in Pokémon Island and should instead focus on surviving in the new era. You can bring her in, Dax said, nodding to Robin after considering the situation with Fishman Island. Using Shirahoshi as a starting point, he planned to let her fall in love with the endless land of Pokémon Island. Then, King Neptune, Queen Odoheim, and the people of Fishman Island would follow. Given a more beautiful and ideal place to live without paying a hefty price, why would anyone still bother seeking the world government's approval? Understood. Robin responded before turning to leave. As Robin departed, Dak began contemplating future possibilities. He was confident that within a year, or even half a year, the inhabitants of Fishman Island would be pleading to move to Pokémon Island. This island had vast lakes, endless seas, and currently, not many humans or other races. Even if more people arrived, they would all be equal, ordinary citizens with no significant military force. Naturally, they would be attracted to living here. The spatial suppression rule of Pokémon Island is a massive constraint for powerful forces like the Navy and the Whitebeard pirates. However, for the weaker communities of Fishman Island, it's a foundational rule ensuring their survival. But once they arrive, how will they sustain themselves? Food. Pokémon Island differs significantly from the outside world as it has not yet achieved food self-sufficiency. Initially, it was an empty island with no inhabitants besides a few Pokémon in the store, so there was no need to consider this issue. But soon, the families of the preparatory employees and the inhabitants of Fishman Island would arrive, necessitating a focus on food supply. At the very least, they need to achieve self-sufficiency. This isn't overly difficult, but requires additional expenditure. Dak could purchase various terrains from the Pokémon Mall to enable farming and animal husbandry. As long as they brought back some seeds, they could start farming. Why not move the entire Fishman Island here? Suddenly, Dak had a flash of inspiration. Initially, he had thought of inviting all the inhabitants of Fishman Island to live on Pokémon Island. But now, he considered moving the entire Fishman Island itself. It seemed incredible, but Fishman Island, which survived 10,000 meters under the sea, had its own biological system allowing its inhabitants to thrive. The plants on Fishman Island could survive due to the sunlight channeled through the trees of the Sabati archipelago. This sunlight could be replicated on Pokémon Island, preserving Fishman Island's ecosystem. Furthermore, the enormous inland sea next to the Alliance base had ample space for Fishman Island. Dak, this is Shirahoshi, Robin said, leading a giant young mermaid towards him. Dak turned and was momentarily stunned by the sight of such a large mermaid child. Hello, Shirahoshi greeted shyly. Currently, Shirahoshi had a bubble ring around her waist, allowing her to move on land, a common method for mermaids from Fishman Island. Without this bubble, they would have to hop to move on land. But Shirahoshi couldn't help but look around and wonder. Do you like this grassland? Dak asked, following her gaze. The vast grassland seemed monotonous, but for many who had never seen such a scene, it was mesmerizing. Yes, Shirahoshi nodded vigorously, her large blue eyes sparkling with wonder. She kept glancing at the grassland, the giant trees, the vast lake, and the impressive structures. You can visit often, Dak offered. Really? I can, Shirahoshi asked, her eyes lighting up with joy. Yes, Dak confirmed, nodding. Shirahoshi's frequent visits would eventually draw King Neptune and Queen Odoheim, allowing them to see the beauty of Pokémon Island and consider moving their people here. Thank you, Dak-sama. Shirahoshi bowed politely, her face glowing with happiness. However, she soon noticed two peculiar fish in the lake staring at her. Are those little fish? Dak turned to see Magikarp and Phoeba, who rarely showed themselves but were now peeking out of the lake. Hello, Magikarp, Phoeba. Would you like to accompany this young lady? Dak asked, squatting by the lake. Gurgle, gurgle. Phoeba remained silent, but Magikarp responded with a series of bubbles, indicating they were just curious about Shirahoshi's comforting presence and had no intention of leaving with her. All right, maybe you'll become friends with her in the future, Dak said, patting the fish on their heads before returning to Shirahoshi. He handed her a token. What's this? Shirahoshi asked, holding the token curiously. This is a pocket token. With this, you can open any door and come to our breeding house. It's a pass to our place, Dak explained. Thank you, Dak-sama. Shirahoshi bowed again, expressing her gratitude. Do you want to stay and play? Dak asked. Watch Ichimi Zichino. Shirahoshi inquired. It's 5:30 in the afternoon. Oh no, I need to go home for dinner. Mother and the others will worry. Shirahoshi shook her head decisively. All right, let Robin take you home. You can come back anytime. Next time, you can explore on your own, Dak said, nodding to Robin, watching them leave Pokémon Island. Standing alone, Dak opened the Pokémon Mall interface. Black soil terrain, red soil terrain, speed fertilizer, long-term fertilizer, rich grain seeds, bean seeds, herb seeds, leaf seeds, waterside herb seeds, sherryberry seeds, orange berry seeds. Food supply needs to be prioritized before the Pokémon Academy, Dak muttered, looking at the panel. He needed to ensure a self-sufficient environment before anyone settled here permanently. We need more preparatory employees. Their families should include farmers, herders, botanists, zoologists, Dak mumbled as he returned to the Alliance base office, a simple setup with a chair and a desk. Sitting down, he began jotting down his plans for Fishman Island and the food supply to avoid forgetting. The next day, Dak personally handled the recruitment of employees. With limited manpower, he couldn't rely on Bon Clay, who was busy distributing Pokemon eggs. Revisiting the list of applicants who wanted to join the Pokemon Alliance, he selected new candidates. In 2 days, Dak recruited 500 more preparatory members, including locals from Water 7 and overseas applicants. Many of them had noted their family's agricultural and animal husbandry experience, making them ideal for supporting Pokemon Island's self-sufficiency. Into Chapter 125. Chapter 12. A week has passed since the last newspaper issue. Due to Morgan's significant scoop over the past 2 weeks, everyone is eagerly anticipating the new issue. People who previously had no habit of subscribing to newspapers are now rushing to buy them. It's not just the newspaper content they are interested in. It's also about what new and exciting developments the Pokémon Alliance has come up with. Last time, they introduced an entire new world, which opened everyone's eyes. Many people are currently on their way to Water 7. The population of Water 7, usually around 30,000, is expected to increase dramatically. No one can predict how large the population will grow. The city, already somewhat crowded, is now becoming even more congested with unemployed people flocking in. If the situation doesn't change, Water 7 is bound to experience numerous adverse incidents. The root cause of this phenomenon is the location of the Pokémon breeding shop. It's the only place people know of that has a connection to the Pokémon Alliance. Those seeking entry to Pokémon Island or wanting to learn more about Pokémon and other worlds naturally head there. Many people in this world aren't interested in the One Piece. Out of 100 people, perhaps only one is willing to sail out in search of One Piece or the title of Pirate King, most likely ending up either obscure or dead at sea. However, the number of people interested in other worlds and Pokémon is vast. Out of 100 people, at least 90 are curious about the concept of other worlds. Although not many have the courage to travel such a long distance to Water 7. The number is still far greater than those becoming pirates. To solve the issue of overcrowding in Water 7, the breeding shop needs to open branches in other locations, providing people opportunities to connect with the Pokémon Alliance. Dak understands this, but currently lacks the manpower to execute it. Specifically, he lacks trustworthy personnel. If he wanted subordinates, there are at least 30,000 people in Water 7 eager to join the Pokémon Alliance. But many of them are unreliable and untrustworthy. How could he entrust them with running a branch? The core staff at the breeding shop are all occupied with their respective tasks, leaving no one available to manage a branch. Running a branch requires many qualifications. For example, even someone as loyal as Zanbai couldn't be left in charge of branch. On his first day, either the branch would be robbed clean overnight, or within a week, Zanbai would deplete all the inventory due to mismanagement. While having someone with Bon Clay's self-defense skills isn't necessary, as it can be compensated with manpower and Pokemon, and the Water 7 branch has Sceptile guarding it, they at least need someone like Bon Clay who can interact freely with customers, introduce products, and calculate transactions. This requirement is somewhat high for the people of this world. Many don't attend school, and only those from families with decent economic conditions or those who have self-taught these skills due to their life experiences receive education. Bon Clay belongs to the latter group. The lack of such talent is why branches can't be established immediately. And unfortunately, Dak doesn't have the time to find such talent right now. Bon Clay has just finished distributing the previous batch of Pokemon eggs, and the funds have been returned. Dak is busy setting up Pokemon Island. Currently, there are 1.07 million Pokecoins in the system balance. Additionally, the number of people pre-ordering Pokemon eggs in Water 7 is slowly increasing. The first batch of Pokemon eggs bought by residents of Water 7 is nearing its hatching period, and those prospective trainers are now purchasing various supplies in preparation. During such busy times, Dak can't help but wish he had access to the Naruto world. After all, there's a Shadow Clone Jutsu and talents like Kakuzu. It's now December in the year 1511 of the Sea Circle calendar, nearing the end of the year. The Sea Train is expected to be completed in about 2 months, and Icebug's return should alleviate much of Dak's pressure. Icebug is precisely the type of irreplaceable talent he needs. Icebug's future achievements in the original story, becoming the mayor of Water 7 and building Galila Company into the world's top shipbuilding company, speak for themselves. Currently, the latest issue of the newspaper is being distributed worldwide. In the Sabaody Archipelago, a pirate crew gathers in a tavern to read the latest newspaper. I heard this issue has some major secrets about the Pokémon Alliance. Yeah, supposedly very explosive news. I have a friend in the news agency who said the Great Pirate Era is coming to an end. Haha, that's an exaggeration. The Great Pirate Era has lasted for 10 years. Let me see, what's in the paper? Scenes like this are playing out all over the world. Even the Sabedi archipelago has descended into chaos due to this news. People who were leisurely strolling through the streets have rushed towards the coast upon receiving the newspaper. Many who are clueless about the situation are also joining the rush. What's going on? Idiot. Look at the newspaper. Don't block my way. I'm heading to Water 7. Screw being a pirate. Anyone can be one. I'm going to be a trainer. Is anyone willing to escort me to Water 7? I'm the president of the Middle Trading Company, and I'm willing to pay a protection fee of 100 million berries. Wife, my love, I will bring you back to life. Isolde, wait for me. The rushing crowd turned into a sea of people. Travel fleets lined up one after another. If someone had a god's eye view at this moment, they would see countless black dots departing from various islands, all heading towards one point. Water 7, the Raftel in everyone's heart, where One Piece supposedly exists. Many places were thrown into turmoil, including Marine headquarters at Marineford, Revolutionary Army headquarters in Baltigo, the World Government, and Celestial Dragons in Marioa, Whitebeard pirates on the Moby Dick, Beast pirates in Wano, and the Charlotte family in Totoland. All organizations and individuals, upon seeing this issue of the newspaper, were thrown into a frenzy. The orchestrator of this chaos, Morgans, was laughing maniacally in a dark room, the sense of accomplishment filling him with joy. Among the many factions, only 3 remained calm. The Marines, who shared the same stance or goals with the Pokémon Alliance, the Revolutionary Army, and the Don Quixote family, who already knew about these developments. On the other hand, many factions were anything but calm. Apart from the 3 mentioned, all other factions were sending people to Water 7, unaware that Sengoku had anticipated this and had Kuzan and Borsalino stationed offshore of Water 7 to eliminate any dark forces aiming for the power of Pokémon. This was one of the reasons Sengoku helped Dak establish a branch in Water 7, to monitor pirates and gangs, preventing them from approaching the breeding shop. Sengoku didn't want Pokemon's power to fall into the hands of these villains, nor did he want them to have access to Pokemon Island and its miraculous items. In his view, Pokemon Island was the future stronghold of the Marines. Sengoku already regarded the Marines as an undercover organization planted within the world government by the Pokemon Alliance. Of course, Dak was unaware of this. However, the Marines couldn't intercept some forces, such as the world government, who were still their bosses, and the Vinsmoke family, an allied nation of the world government, which wasn't considered an evil organization. These 2 forces were on their way to Water 7, their intentions unclear but predictable: resurrection and immortality. These words alone were like the whispers of demons, irresistibly attracting everyone. Many people were arriving with the hope of achieving immortality or reviving someone they had lost. Within the Don Quixote family, everyone could see that since the newspaper's release, Senor Pink had been unable to sit still, appearing distracted. Calm down, Pink. I know, Daffy, I know. Senor Pink had a pile of cigarettes in front of him. It was his first time smoking since Lucian's death, and he couldn't stop. He wanted to revive Lucian and Gimlet, to undo all his past mistakes. But he was also a member of the Don Quixote family, Doflamingo's family, and he had to help Doflamingo achieve his dream. Even if such items exist, that guy might not give them to others. He'll have his terms, so don't rush. Those who go to Water 7 can only watch. Doflamingo also wanted immortality. If he didn't, he wouldn't have sought the Ope no Mi for so many years. But he knew very well that even if they went to Water 7, they wouldn't obtain items that granted immortality. To get such items, they had to follow Dax and the Pokemon Alliance's rules. Doflamingo understood this because he often played such games with those weaker than himself. Watch closely. The world government has already sent people to Water 7. This time, they're in for a big setback. End of Chapter 126. Chapter 126. Dak anticipated the waves of chaos happening outside, although he hadn't seen them firsthand. However, he was not too concerned. The times had changed. It was no longer the Pokemon Alliance that needed to worry about others' attitudes. Instead, it was the others who needed to figure out how to approach them. As for the branches in the 4 Seas and the Sabidi Archipelago, It was a matter of taking things one step at a time. Right now, he didn't have the manpower, and he certainly didn't have time to go out and recruit core members. Dak practically lived on Pokémon Island now. Unless other members needed him to make decisions, he rarely left. He was currently busy setting up the family residential and agricultural zones. The former was to accommodate the families of the reserve members, while the latter provided these people with the means to be self-sufficient. So far, the only food source on Pokémon Island was the nanab berries on the distant tree of beginning. The problem was that unless someone could fly up there, it was practically impossible to harvest those berries. At this moment, a new cluster of buildings was constructed a short distance from the Pokémon Alliance base and the battle competition venue. In the map of the modified Pokémon Island, the yellow circle represented the residential zone, and the green area indicated the agricultural zone. Great, from now on, the employees' families will live in this semicircular residential area, Dax said, satisfied as he looked at the cluster of buildings forming a large semicircle. These buildings were three-story villas, common in rural southern regions in his previous life. In the rural south, such buildings were often self-built, so they were affordable, cheap, yet aesthetically pleasing. Families of the employees could choose which building to live in, and those with good relationships could even choose to be neighbors. Pokémon Island was vast and sparsely populated, so there was no need to stack countless tin cans filled with people like in big cities. Having separate homes for each family could slow down the pace of life and foster neighborly relationships. In contrast, in urban apartments, people might live just a few meters away from their neighbors for years without ever meeting them. Dak purchased a total of 30,000 such houses, spending 300,000 poke coins. Each villa cost just 10 poke coins, equivalent to 100,000 berries, an absolute bargain. This city could conservatively accommodate 30,000 households. With at least 3 people per household, the city's permanent population wouldn't be less than 100,000, not counting Pokémon. The residential zone not only housed employees' families, but also served as the boundary between the city's urban and suburban areas. To the north of the residential zone would be the urban area, where Dak planned to set up a commercial street, entertainment street, food street, Pokémon Center, Pokemart, contest hall, breeding competition venue, Pokémon school, and other buildings. Currently, there was only a battle competition venue. To the south of the residential zone was the suburban area. 2 large restricted zones were designated here, which were actually agricultural zones for farming and livestock. Transforming these 2 zones cost Dak another 300,000 poke coins. The cost wasn't high, but the area was enormous. These zones belonged to the Pokémon Alliance, and people could rent land from the Alliance at a very low price. Beyond these zones, the southern area was more flexible, potentially used for research institutes or Pokémon breeding grounds. By now, Dak had spent 600,000 poke coins. This didn't include the purchase of Pokémon World plant seeds. Although these weren't necessary, people might plant unique plants from the pirate world. Next, we should build some shops, Dak said, looking at the vast empty space behind the residential zone. However, he quickly frowned. The first batch of Pokémon eggs in Water 7 should be hatching soon. As Dak anticipated, just as this thought crossed his mind, a huge commotion erupted in Water 7. Every street and alley was filled with prospective trainers running towards the north shore, holding glowing eggs. This is too much. Bon Clay often found himself with headaches recently due to the sheer number of issues arising. For instance, at the breeding shops branch, the previously desolate area was now crowded with thousands of people, and the number was steadily increasing. Each person held a glowing Pokémon egg. Seeing so many Pokémon eggs gave Bon Clay a headache, worrying about whether the Pokémon babies would end up wrecking Water 7. Even Icebug, who was busy with the Sea Train project, had come to the branch to see if he could help. "Ah, it's about time," Dak's voice came from behind as he emerged from the shop. The noisy scene gradually quieted down upon his arrival. Recognizing him as the Pokémon Alliance leader and one of the most influential people in the world. Finally, but what do we do about this number? Bon Clay sighed with relief at Dak's presence. "Don't worry too much. The Marines won't let things get out of hand," Dak reassured, pointing to the nearby Marine base. Many Marines were already dispatched, some with Pokémon. Sengoku, having learned from the Marineford experience, had sent experienced new trainers and their Pokémon to help. Of course, they had their motives. Sengoku rarely deployed troops without some benefit in mind. He wasn't the philanthropic type. Dak could guess their intentions, gaining public favor and potentially recruiting some of the new trainers. Trust the Marines, Icebug. Water 7 won't sink, Dak said. Icebug felt uneasy, noticing a bead of sweat on his forehead. He searched Dak's expression for any hint of a joke, but found none, causing more sweat to form. Think of it this way. If Water 7 sinks today, you and Tom won't have to worry about it anymore, Dak joked. Thanks a lot. Icebug replied sarcastically before deciding to return to work on the sea train, realizing he couldn't help here. Is it really okay? Bon Clay whispered to Dak after Icebug left. Smo. Smoochum on Bon Clay's shoulder mimicked his posture. Indeed, Pokémon often grew to resemble their trainers. Smoochum was a prime example of this. Conversely, trainers might also start resembling their Pokémon, as seen with Monet. It's not entirely problem-free. People's understanding of Pokémon is still too shallow. The worst that could happen is that Water 7 might look a bit rundown tomorrow, but it's not a major issue, Dak said optimistically. Good thing I waited until Icebug left, Bon Clay sighed in relief. Smo. Smoochum echoed with a thumbs up. It looks like they'll hatch by tomorrow morning. We can get a good night's sleep, Dak stretched, observing the eggs' glowing frequency. Aren't you worried Icebug won't sleep and come knocking on your door? Bon clétised. I'll lock my door. Besides, Icebug isn't the type to do that, Dak replied, heading back into the shop. Before going inside, he reminded Bon Clay, "Oh, the family residential area is ready. Notify our 1,500 reserve members and their families that they can pack up and leave this harsh world." Your way of putting it is strange, Bon Clay remarked. End of chapter 127. Chapter 127. After a rare good night's sleep, Dak arrived in Water 7 early the next morning. Nearly 11,000 Pokémon eggs had hatched. While Water 7 was still the same city, its atmosphere had noticeably changed. Darkrai, let's go see what's happening in the city. Dak. Darkrai emerged from Dak's shadow and lifted him, allowing them to fly over Water 7. The city was bustling. By the riverside, a boy was soaking wet, holding a coughing Pidgey in his arms. The little bird had just hatched and attempted to fly, only to plummet into the water. The boy had been thrilled to see the lively bird, but was horrified when it fell into the lake. Without hesitation, he jumped in to rescue it. Fortunately, Water 7's rivers were teeming with friendly Bronzer, akin to Pokémon, but without special abilities. Today, they were busier than ever, not ferrying passengers but rescuing little Pokémon. A Bronzer had saved the Pidgey. Flying a short distance, Dak and Darkrai saw another amusing scene. In front of a butcher shop, a woman was squatting in distress, resting her chin in her hands as she tried to console a crying baby Pokémon. She had tried various ways to calm it, but nothing worked, making her feel helpless. Oh, a rare Pokémon indeed, Dak remarked from the sky, squinting at the scene. It was a Cubone, a very unique Pokémon known for its tragic backstory and distinctive appearance. It was fragile, prone to crying, yet stubborn and strong-willed. This Cubone seemed to be crying for a similar reason as a Togepi. Dak realized the woman might not understand Cubone's needs, so he had Darkrai lower him to the ground. "Oh, it's the Alliance Leader," the woman exclaimed in surprise upon seeing Dak. Alliance Leader. It seemed to have become a common title for Dak in the pirate world. "Alliance Leader, can you help me?" "This little one won't stop crying," the woman asked, holding up the Cubone for Dak to inspect. "And it won't take off this skull. Every time I try to touch it, it cries even louder." Cubone is a special Pokémon. The skull is, well, you can think of it as part of its body. It won't take it off, and it also needs a bone, Dak explained, rubbing the crying Cubone's belly. There was a rumor that Cubone was a Charmander whose mother, a Charizard or Charmeleon, had died, and its tail had extinguished. Dak dismissed it as a fun myth. "A bone? We have plenty of bones in the shop," the woman said, taking Cubone inside. Moments later, Cubone's cries grew louder. Dak peeked inside and saw the woman had given Cub One a bone twice its size. The poor Pokemon toppled under the weight. "Oh dear, this little one is quite clumsy," the woman sighed, helping Cub One up and looking at Dak helplessly. Alliance leader, it doesn't seem to want to eat the bone. Dak realized that both the new trainers and their Pokemon babies were experiencing a steep learning curve. After explaining that Cub One needed a smaller bone to use as a weapon, not food, the woman finally understood. She handed Cub One a small bone, and the Pokemon stopped crying, though it still looked a bit teary-eyed. "Such a crybaby," the woman remarked, wiping Cubone's face with a tissue and cradling it gently. "When Cub One stops crying so much, it means it's getting stronger and is close to evolving," Dak explained before leaving the shop with Darkrai. "Evolving? I don't quite understand, but that's okay. Little Cub One can always be my crybaby," the woman said, not intending to make Cub One fight. Flying from the outer to the inner city, Dak noticed a stark contrast. The inner city was less crowded, inhabited by wealthier families, and thus more orderly than the chaotic outer city. In a courtyard, a graceful woman fed a newly hatched Nadu with moo-moo milk from the breeding shop. She gently wiped the spilled milk from the bird's beak with her sleeve. In another courtyard, a well-known middle-aged shipwright was delighted with his newly hatched Buffalint, a 1-meter-tall bull. The Pokemon had burst from its egg and started running around the spacious yard, much to the shipwright's amusement. They soon bonded, running and resting together. Not all Pokemon were as boisterous upon hatching. Many, especially females, were calm and well-behaved. Some even acted mature beyond their age, though often it was just an act. After spending the entire morning exploring, Dak saw no severe incidents or reports of trainers mistreating or abandoning their Pokemon. It's impossible for every trainer to love every Pokemon equally. Some Pokemon, like Grimer, were bound to be disliked, much like the Navy's coughing, which people avoided due to its gas. However, why didn't Smoker dislike coughing? Because it was his Pokemon, which he had personally hatched and cared for. It was like his child. He had been cautious and dedicated, so he could never easily hate his own Pokemon. Teaching Pokemon like coughing to control their abilities is part of a trainer's duty. Now, Coughing had friends in Marineford, often playing with an Ekans and Meowth. In Water 7, no trainers disliked their Pokemon because they had worked hard to hatch them. Even the ugliest Pokemon became endearing. However, not everyone shared this view. Outsiders might still see them as ugly, but to the trainers, they were special. Overall, Water 7 had gained over 11,000 new trainers. These trainers had flaws and areas to improve, but they were generally competent. With this, Dak felt reassured. He instructed the inspection team and the 1,500 reserve members to keep an eye on the city's events and stop any negative incidents immediately. He then returned to the breeding shop. Next, he needed to prepare for the relocation of the reserve members and their families to Pokémon Island. There was still much to do. End of Chapter 128. Chapter 128, the total number of reserve employees and their families was only 5,000. This meant many families had just 1 or 2 people, which was quite normal in the world of pirates. When Bon Clay informed these people, they arrived at the Pokemon breeding shop's entrance that very evening, carrying large bags and even pushing carts, clearly ready for the move. It wasn't that they packed quickly. They had been preparing for this day since they became reserve employees. There were 1,500 families, each with at least 1 Pokemon. The wealthier families might have 2 or 3. The number of new trainers in Water 7 dropped below 10,000. Not only would these 1,500 people leave with their families, but many had already been persuaded by the Navy and the Revolutionary Army to leave, and some may have joined other forces. However, these are just a few. Besides the 1,500 leaving with Dak, the total number of other departing trainers was less than 500. Many bought Pokemon for a stable life or companionship, not to venture into danger. They preferred to live peacefully in Water 7, with the breeding shop's protection, hoping to join the Pokemon Alliance and live on Pokemon Island, where they wouldn't have to worry about bad guys and their family safety. At the breeding shop's entrance, Dak made his final announcement. "I'll make this last statement. Once you decide to settle on Pokemon Island, you won't be able to freely travel between the two worlds. Unless the Alliance opens a portal for activities, contact between the two worlds will be minimal. Dax seriously explained the pros and cons of living on Pokémon Island. Living on Pokémon Island meant safety from being harmed by others, but they would also lose experiences unique to the pirate world. For example, during the initial development of Pokémon Island, there would be few interesting events, no newspapers or TV. They would live a simple life, learning about the outside world only through returning family members. If anyone regrets their decision, you can leave now. But know this, after leaving, you won't be granted residency on Pokémon Island again. Too many people want to live there. The island isn't just for you. Dak looked at the crowd. He spoke the truth. Recently, there had been incidents in Water 7 where people tried to extort or coerce the right to live on Pokémon Island from these families. Dak was infuriated, thinking how mindless some people could be. Living on Pokémon Island was a privilege, he decided, not something that could be transferred. Even if someone gave up their spot, it wouldn't go to those who did such despicable things. In essence, anyone who committed serious crimes would never live on Pokémon Island. Those who enjoyed bullying weaker people would eventually find themselves the only ones left in the pirate world, feeling what their victims felt. Dak might even record their self-destructive behavior to show the residents of Pokémon Island the consequences of evil deeds. Anyone committing serious crimes on Pokémon Island would either be imprisoned there or exiled back to the pirate world. After Dak's initial statement, some, particularly the wealthy, hesitated. They enjoyed their wealth in the pirate world, but would find fewer ways to spend it on Pokémon Island. However, Dak's second statement made their resolve clear. They became determined, like stubborn holdouts. Yes, I will be a 10-year resident of Pokémon Island. Since no one wants to give up their spot, let's proceed. I'll work quickly to build the city you'll live in, so you can enjoy your new life. Dak turned, and a rectangular, mirror-like portal appeared. Enter our new world, everyone. He stepped through first. The people eagerly followed, forming lines but holding their excitement back under Sceptile's watchful eye. On the other side of the portal, the entrance to Pokémon Island, a long blue and white porcelain bridge awaited. 5 tables and chairs were set up at the bridge's entrance, occupied by Bon Clay, Robin, Monet, Perona, and Sugar. That evening, Dak had reassigned them from their usual tasks to register these 5,000 people and issue Pokémon Island resident IDs. Please line up in 5 queues for identity registration and to receive your ID cards. Pokémon need to be registered too. Once registered, I'll take you to the residential area where you can choose your new home, Dak announced. Before he finished, the 5,000 people scrambled to form lines. Fortunately, no stampede occurred. Families with large Pokémon had an advantage, as others couldn't push them aside. Dak had anticipated this. Even in his previous world, where education was compulsory, some people still pushed and cut lines. These people needed generations of reformation. They're even giving us houses. I die for the Pokémon Alliance. This is great. Free houses. I wonder what they look like. They should be nice, right? Look around. The Alliance leader is rich. He wouldn't give us shabby houses. I hope they're beautiful. Too bad we can't buy flowers or decorations yet, even with money. As people lined up, they chatted about Dak's promises. Dak oversaw the registration process. Some Pokémon, finding it boring, napped in their trainers' arms. The 5 core breeding shop members found the process manageable and quick. All 1,500 families had their details collected earlier. Only trustworthy individuals with good records were allowed, so no time was wasted on that. The main task was registering the newly hatched Pokémon. The Alliance needed complete records of all Pokémon on the island. For instance, if a water pipe was bitten through and no one confessed, they could check families with sharp-toothed Pokémon. After registration, the IDs were issued, similar to those from Dak's previous world. Example, front, top left, a black Pokeball emblem, Pokémon Island resident ID issuing authority, Pokémon Alliance back, right, a photo space currently blank, name, John Doe gender, male species, human birth date, Grand Line calendar XXXXXX address, Pokémon Island, Alliance City, Residential Zone, XX House ID number. XXX, this was the first generation ID temporarily given to these employees and their families. Alliance City was the name for the city around the Pokémon Alliance HQ. There would be more cities in the future. IDs would be updated, especially the photo and birth date sections. In about an hour, all registrations were completed. Dak floated up and addressed the crowd. From today, Pokémon Island will have its own calendar. To avoid confusion, today is the 10th of December, year 0 of the Alliance calendar, matching the Grand Line calendar. A year will still have 12 months, 365 days, and a week will be 7 days. We will also have our own holidays. Our first holiday is in 20 days, New Year's Day on January 1st, year 1 of the Alliance calendar. This holiday marks the start of a new year. The Pokémon Alliance will host events to celebrate. Having their own calendar meant future children born on Pokémon Island would have their birth dates recorded in the Alliance calendar. Many holidays from Dak's previous world and the Pokémon world could be adopted here. In a Chapter 129, after leading everyone to the residential zone to choose their houses, Dak noticed that although they were all from Water 7, they didn't cluster together. Those who were close chose houses nearby, while those who weren't as familiar picked homes farther apart. Everyone seemed quite satisfied with their new homes, especially those who weren't well off to begin with. To them, these 3-story villas were like mansions, and their joy was evident. As night fell, Dak decided not to tire them out any further and returned to the breeding shop to rest. The next day, he planned to create some stores based on these people's professions, helping them prepare for their new lives. Additionally, he needed to set up a friendly shop where they could purchase daily necessities. For the 1,500 reserve members, their current task was to take care of their Pokémon partners until they were no longer in their infancy. Once their Pokémon reached a more mature stage, these members could be assigned to various tasks and possibly stationed at different branches. Their future roles would be divided into specific tasks, such as inspection and security, but this was dependent on 3 conditions. 1. Pokémon must mature beyond infancy. 2. The branches must be established. 3. Branch managers must be found. The next morning, Dak left his room early and headed to Pokémon Island. He aimed to set the overall layout of Alliance City, with finer details to be adjusted later. The most critical buildings were the Pokémon Center and the Friendly Shop. Any city in the Pokémon world would be incomplete without these key facilities. Both the Pokémon Center and the Friendly Shop were exchanged from the Miracle Shop in their largest forms. Such buildings typically appeared in the largest cities and League headquarters. These are not simple rectangular buildings, but complex structures. Each building cost Dak 10,000 Miracle coins, reflecting their grand and luxurious designs. The interior areas were pre-configured, requiring Dak only to add equipment as needed. The Pokémon Center was placed near the League base, close to the western side of the battle competition arena. Its roof bore a red and white Pokeball symbol. The Friendly Shop was situated on the opposite side, near the future site of the coordination competition arena. Its roof had a blue and white Pokeball symbol. Sigh, I need to hire some medical staff. It looks like a trip to Drum Island is in order. And for the Friendly Shop, I'll need to recruit some employees, possibly from the families of the staff, Dak thought. Among the employees' families, some might be looking for work, making them suitable candidates for positions in the Friendly Shop. As Dak surveyed the towering buildings, a new problem dawned on him. The island needed a unified currency. We'll handle the currency exchange tomorrow, Dak decided. He had already planned the exchange rates and the new currency name, Poke Coins, with basic units of copper, silver, and gold. 1 Miracle coin, 1 gold, 100 silver, 10,000 copper, 10,000 berries. Given the current wealth of Pokémon Island residents, most would have only a few dozen gold coins, with wealthier individuals possibly possessing up to 1,000. Daily transactions would likely use copper and silver units. Pokémon Island would primarily use virtual currency and mobile payments. Residents' IDs would function as their bank cards for transactions and savings, with a set payment password during currency exchange. With the Pokémon Center and Friendly Shop in place, Dak turned to the residents' quality of life, which would also impact future students and tourists. In the city center, Dak designated a large area for various shops. First, he spent 50,000 miracle coins to create a Pokémon park in the very center. The park's core featured a clear lake, ideal for relaxation and scenic views, with safety signs warning of deep water. Surrounding the lake was a small park filled with diverse plants, seating, and public exercise equipment, perfect for evening strolls or student dates. Outside the park was another ring. This ring would host shops where families could work. Dak had already set up numerous empty buildings of various types. North of the park was the entertainment district. This area would include amusement parks, battle arenas, arcades, and eventually hotels, making it a hot spot for students and couples. South of the park was the food street. As the name suggested, this area would offer various delicacies. In the future, only renowned dishes from different worlds like Water 7's Aqua Meat and Konoha's Ichiraka Ramen would be available here. West of the park was the shopping district. This street would house jewelry, stationery, clothing, electronics, furniture stores, and more. East of the park was the leisure district. This area catered to quieter individuals, including cafes, libraries, gyms, and other serene spots. After a day's work, Dak had set up these areas. Creating such a vast region cost Dak 250,000 miracle coins, nearly matching the residential and farming zone's expenses. The major cost was transforming the terrain, converting flat grasslands to lakes, planting beautiful flora, and paving walkways. These investments would eventually pay off. Unlike residential houses, these shops belonged to and would always belong to the Pokémon Alliance. To open a store, one had to rent the space. Alliance City was destined to be the central hub of Pokémon Island, akin to the capital in Dak's previous world. Residents, having finished settling into their new homes, watched Dak create buildings and facilities in awe. Some even knelt, regarding him as a deity. In a way, they weren't wrong. On Pokémon Island, the true deities would undoubtedly be Giratina, Darkrai, and others. As time passed, and these Pokémon appeared less frequently, they would become legends. The island would bear their marks, with more people worshipping them, similar to the Pokémon world's history. Dak anticipated that one day he would grow tired of being the league leader and choose a successor. Maybe then, Naruto's goal would shift from being Hokage to being the league leader. From that moment, residents began to speculate about Dak's identity. Initially seen as a powerful human like Whitebeard, Dak was now revered as a divine being. The more they thought this way, the more convinced they became. Someone who commanded godlike Pokémon had to be a god himself. Dak didn't bother correcting these misconceptions, unsure how to explain his actions. Letting them misunderstand seemed simpler. In the future, he might be seen as the Arceus of Pokémon Island. For now, Dak didn't want to spend brain power on distant matters. After briefly introducing the new areas to the residents, Dak departed. Signs at each intersection would indicate the street names, so he wasn't worried about confusion. People began exploring, discussing which locations would be best for their future shops. End of Chapter 130. Chapter 130 the next day, Dak set up a notice board in front of the residential zone, informing everyone to bring their money to exchange for the universal currency of Pokémon Island. Each person could decide how much to bring, but from now on, all transactions on the island would be conducted using the virtual currency linked to their personal ID cards. Particularly in establishments owned by the Alliance, such as Pokémon centers and friendly shops, only virtual currency would be accepted. Payments could be made by swiping the ID card and entering a password. Of course, people could still trade in berries privately, but such transactions wouldn't be protected by the Alliance. Any disputes arising from these trades would have to be resolved independently. For the next 3 days, Robin would stay in the lobby of the Alliance base, waiting for people to come and exchange their money. Meanwhile, Dak left Pokémon Island to find Bon Clay. He needed Bon Clay to inventory the items required for the friendly shop in Alliance City. Dak would then exchange for all the necessary items and stock the shop. Due to the large scale of the friendly shop, it wouldn't just sell Pokémon-related items, but also various goods that trainers might need. Dak planned to include items he had seen in the Miracle Shop, such as unique plant seeds, fertilizers, and popular items like trainer fishing rods and bicycles. Household items, on the other hand, would eventually be sold in stores set up in the shopping street, so the friendly shop wouldn't cover this area. However, for now, he needed to procure some basic items for the new residents since the commercial street was still empty. With Bon Clay handling these tasks, the management of the branch in Water 7 temporarily fell to Icebug. Fortunately, Icebug was experienced enough to handle the responsibilities. Dak planned to give himself a day off. He felt overworked and needed a good rest. However, things didn't go as planned. Important visitors arrived, disrupting Dak's intended break. When Icebug summoned Dak to the Water 7 branch, Dak's expression became playful. He hadn't planned to confront the world government yet, at least not immediately, but they had come to him. 3 men in white suits and masks stood at the door of the breeding shop, each about 3 meters tall, standard admiral height, with masks representing a lion, an elephant, and an eagle. Is it really okay for CP0 to show up so blatantly here? Are you not worried about being seen? Dak's last comment hit the mark. The world government, or rather the 5 elders, wanted everyone to know that they had come to the Pokémon Alliance. They likely thought Dak would cooperate, thereby elevating the world government status. We have a matter to inform you about. Starting today. Sceptile, Darkrai, turned them into stumps. As soon as he heard the word inform, Dak's mood soured. He had intended to speak normally, but his mood turned, so he abandoned that plan. Dak always intended to eventually overthrow the world government. Killing their people didn't concern him. He had only left them alone for now to avoid chaos. A dark vortex appeared behind the 3 CP0 agents, who remained unaware. Simultaneously, Darkrai used Dark Void to put them to sleep. When they woke up seconds later, Sceptile had already severed their limbs. Sceptile, looking proud, disdainfully glanced at the 3 agents now on the ground. For just one strike, Sceptile could tell these 3 weren't on Mihawk's level. They were trash. What were you about to say? Dak squatted next to the agents, now reduced to stumps. Thanks to his past experiences, blood didn't faze him as much, though the sight still made him queasy. You! Smack! Dak stepped on the lion-masked agent's head, silencing him. Dak had a good idea of what they intended to say. The world government likely wanted the Pokémon Alliance to supply them with Pokémon or rare items, possibly offering payment. There wouldn't be any other options. The world government had always been arrogant and brainless, with a deeply ingrained sense of superiority. To make them submit, they'd need to be beaten into submission, to the point where they doubted their existence. I'm not interested in listening. Dak muttered and stepped back. People had gathered near the northern edge of Water 7, watching the scene unfold. They didn't recognize the 3 white-suited men, but they believed Dak was a good person. After all, he sold them Pokémon eggs. In their minds, anyone Dak dealt with so harshly had to be a villain. This subconscious shift in perception was crucial. To the people of Water 7, the Pokémon Alliance represented justice. This transformation, quiet yet profound, was key to the Alliance ruling the new era. Lord Leader! Dak hadn't even removed his foot when he saw Zambai and his followers rushing over with weapons. Their quick response surprised him. From the moment the 3 CP0 agents arrived to now, only 3 to 5 minutes had passed. For the first few minutes, the agents had simply waited, not doing anything out of line. Yet, Zambai and his group sensed something amiss and rushed over. Their keen intuition was commendable. Though Zambai lacked talent for combat, he was an excellent subordinate. Remove their masks and tie the mistakes at the door. If they speak, slap them 10 times. With Sceptile on guard, Dak wasn't worried about the agents escaping. Even the Navy admirals couldn't take them from Sceptile's grip. Maybe if the entire Rocks Pirates or the 5 Elders came, they might have a chance. Got it. Zambai and his followers didn't hesitate, quickly setting to work. They didn't care who these people were, only that they were handled as instructed. Icebug, if more people from the world government come, let me know immediately. As Dak prepared to return to the breeding shop for some rest, he reminded Icebug, from now on, the Pokémon Alliance and the world government would be openly at odds. The most awkward party would be the Navy. After all, there's a Navy branch right next to the breeding shop. If the world government ordered the Navy to capture the Alliance members, what would they do? This was a dilemma for Sengoku to handle. Dak didn't intend to get involved. If the Navy decided to oppose them, they would fight. Is it really okay? Icebug looked worried. Raised in this world, the world government's psychological influence was deeply ingrained in him. He naturally felt uneasy, especially since, from his teenage years, Tom had been forced to work on the sea train because of the world government's decisions. Icebug had spent half his life under their shadow. Although he didn't know the exact identities of the three white-suited men, he could tell they were high-ranking officials. Seeing Dak order Darkrai and Sceptile to mutilate them made Icebug uneasy. He couldn't be blamed. Unlike other core members, Icebug hadn't spent much time in Pokémon Island or the main breeding shop. His time was mostly spent building the sea train with Tom and Frankie. His limited exposure meant he didn't fully grasp the Alliance's power. Icebug's fear was purely from a lack of understanding. If he knew the true extent of the Alliance's strength, he wouldn't worry at all. In a Chapter 131. Chapter 131, Don't Worry, Icebug. Let me put it this way. Right now, the Pokémon Alliance has the power to destroy the world government. I just need them around for the time being to maintain stability, Dax said, patting Icebug's shoulder. Many people want to be bad guys because, without the law's constraints, bad guys can live quite comfortably. But why are there ultimately fewer bad guys? Because the Navy, which upholds justice, will arrest them. In short, they are cowards. Many have the heart of a thief, but lack the courage. It's not moral consciousness that restrains them. In a world without education, talking about morals is nonsense. It's the world government and the Navy that restrain these people. The Pokémon Alliance now indeed has the capability to annihilate the world government and then take over as the new boss of the Navy, continuing to uphold justice. However, the Pokémon Alliance's current prestige and reputation are nowhere near the world government's. Despite the recent buzz around the Pokémon Alliance, the world government has been prominent for 800 years. If the Pokémon Alliance destroys the world government now, many people with wishful thinking will start roaming the seas, causing havoc and terrorizing civilians until the Pokémon Alliance establishes a new authority. But the Alliance is still in its infancy, lacking personnel. Dak is busy managing affairs in both worlds, leaving no time to deal with these new threats. While destroying the world government is an option, it is a last resort that would harm the world and its innocent people greatly. By keeping the world government temporarily, the Pokémon Alliance can develop itself, popularize Pokémon, and build its prestige. When they have enough manpower and Dak has fewer responsibilities, they can naturally take over the new era without causing significant damage. Really? Are we that strong? Icebug couldn't believe it. Though he knew Darkrai and Sceptile were powerful and that Giratina might be even more formidable, he had no concrete idea of their capabilities. Icebug's perspective was not much higher than an average person. He hadn't seen many powerful individuals in action. His admiration for Sceptile destroying Aqua Laguna showed that he was just an ordinary citizen of Water 7, with his horizons only gradually expanding after joining the breeding house. Was Aqua Laguna terrifying? It was, but the world was not short of people capable of dealing with such a massive tsunami. People like Newgate and Kazan, whose abilities were well-suited, could handle it effortlessly. That's right. We are that strong. Dak calmly acknowledged the Pokémon Alliance's strength. Although the Alliance's real powerhouses were just 3 Pokémon, it didn't matter. They were part of the Alliance, and that made the Alliance powerful. All right then, as long as you know what you're doing, Icebug nodded, reassured by Dak's words. He returned to the breeding house to mind the store. Icebug was also studying how to develop the breeding house better, as Dak planned to have him take over the Water 7 branch once the Sea Train project was complete. Bon Clay would then be assigned to another branch, such as the one planned for Sabati Archipelago or other tasks. People like Bon Clay, who were mobile and had some combat ability, were needed for more dynamic roles rather than static positions in Pokémon Island. Darkrai floated over to Dak and whispered something in his ear. Oh, take me there, Dak decided after a brief thought. Darkrai nodded, grabbing Dak and disappearing into the shadows. Guild Tesoro, who had been fleeing from the Don Quixote family, couldn't hold back his steps after seeing the information in the newspaper 3 days ago. He hurried to Water 7, his mind filled with one phrase: resurrection. Resurrection, resurrection, resurrection. His mind was dominated by this word. He didn't know if it was true, but if it was, he was willing to do anything to obtain such an item. He thought all was lost, with no way back. But now a way back was right before him. He could bring back the girl he loved and have her once more. Some say, to understand love, look at Senior Pink. But Senior's story wasn't about love. He deceived Rujin and failed to rush home in time to take their son, Gimlet, to the hospital. Rujin hated Senior for his deception. She had always said she hated pirates. That love story ended with Rujin no longer loving Senior, while he remained full of guilt and unrequited affection. Senior's was a tale of deep affection, not love. For love, look at Golden Emperor Guild Tesoro. Tesoro worked hard for 3 years to buy Stella's freedom, and Stella listened to him sing from her cage for 3 years. He earned the money and won her love. They loved each other. But on the day Tesoro could buy her freedom, on what should have been their happiest day, the celestial dragons appeared. They were just one step ahead of Tesoro, and that one step cost him Stella. This isn't just a pirate version of Jiraiya and Tsunade. Jiraiya and Tsunade also came close, but fell just short. Tesoro, too, was a fierce man. Knowing full well what the celestial dragons represented, he didn't hesitate to pick up a gun and attack them to save Stella. Though the consequence was being captured and enslaved together, his willingness to act showed his true character. For 22 years after Stella's death, Tesoro climbed to the top, becoming the famous Golden Emperor in the New World, a commercial genius, the Dark World's golden ruler, controlling 20% of the world's berries, the richest man, and manipulating both the celestial dragons and the world government through wealth. Such a character, over 2 decades, with 10 fingers adorned with gold rings, except for one bare ring finger. Even when defeated by Luffy, he thought of Stella. His story mirrored Senior Pink's, who thought of Rujin when defeated by Frankie. But Tesoro's tale was truly about love, because the girl he loved him back until the end. At this moment, in a dark alley, Tesoro stood wide-eyed, watching Dak and his Pokémon kill 3 CP0 agents. Having been a slave in Mariewa, he knew exactly what CP0 represented in terms of status and power. It was this knowledge that shocked him. BB Boss next to Tesoro, a short man in black, Mr. Tanaka, covered his mouth in surprise, pointing a trembling finger at the scene by the breeding shop. The Pokémon Alliance dared to attack the world government? Right under the Navy's nose. Nearby, a red-haired woman in a black dress, Baccarat, also gulped, her ample chest heaving. They were Mr. Tanaka and Baccarat, comrades who had escaped with Tesoro during the Mariewa slave uprising. As slaves, Tesoro had often helped them, earning their loyalty. Despite being hunted by the Don Quixote family, they stuck with Tesoro. Both were devil fruit users, given fruits by the celestial dragons. Mr. Tanaka with the warp fruit and Baccarat with the luck fruit. Baccarat's luck fruit was almost a cheat, absorbing others' luck to enhance another's. Tesoro's immense wealth wasn't just due to his gold fruit. Baccarat's help was indispensable. The Navy, they're pretending not to see. Tesoro saw a few Marines drawn out by the commotion, but then retreat, locking the base gates. The Pokémon Alliance and the Navy are in cahoots. Mr. Tanaka nodded confidently. The newspaper reports were true. The Pokémon Alliance really has the power to destroy the world in another world. Otherwise, the Navy's attitude makes no sense. Baccarat, unable to stay calm, edged closer to Tesoro and Mr. Tanaka for a sense of security. No matter what the truth is, I must get that item, Tesoro muttered, clenching his teeth and looking ahead. But as he looked again, Dak, who had been at the shop's entrance, had vanished. Where is he? Are you looking for me? A voice from above startled the trio. End of Chapter 132. Chapter 132, Leader of the Pokémon Alliance. Tesoro looked up at Dak, who was descending from midair, accompanied by Darkrai. At this moment, at least 1,000 pairs of eyes in Water 7 were fixed on the commotion at the entrance of the breeding house. However, Dak had specifically singled out Tesoro in the farthest corner. Tesoro was puzzled. Tell me, what is it that you must obtain? Dak asked, observing the three individuals who appeared far more immature than they did in the movie. His eyes sparkled with excitement. When Darkrai had informed him of the three Devil Fruit users, Dak had initially suspected they might be spies from the world government. Instead, it turned out to be none other than the renowned Golden Emperor. Dak had always considered recruiting Tesoro into the Pokémon Alliance. Every time he used the breeding house's random teleportation feature, he hoped to encounter him by chance. After all, when it came to the top merchant in the pirate world, Guild Tesoro would be the first to come to mind. Dak had high hopes of enlisting Tesoro to help the Pokémon Alliance make money. Now, serendipitously, Tesoro had come to him, bringing along two capable subordinates. This was perfect. With both Tesoro and Iceberg, the Pokémon Alliance would have two commercial geniuses, a highly favorable situation. Dak struggled to keep a straight face, trying not to let his grin stretch to his ears. Please, Dash. Tesoro hesitated for a moment before making up his mind. Is it true that there exists an item that can bring the dead back to life? And what price must one pay to obtain it? Dak interrupted, answering before Tesoro could finish his question. Tesoro's wide eyes confirmed that Dak had guessed correctly. How is that possible? Mr. Tanaka and Baccarat exclaimed, stepping back in shock and clutching their chests. Dak didn't bother to explain. True mind reading might be questionable, but high-level psychic abilities could approximate it, allowing for predictions of someone's general thoughts during Pokémon battles, akin to mind reading. Yes, Tesoro nodded, clenching his fists. Unlike his subordinates, Tesoro didn't find it strange that Dak could guess his thoughts. Since the newspaper reported that the breeding house had items capable of resurrection and eternal life, many had come seeking them. Indeed, there is an item that can bring someone back to life, Dak confirmed, causing the three to hold their breaths, not daring to interrupt. But Dak suddenly stopped speaking, leaving them hanging. The three were nearly suffocating from anticipation, desperate for Dak to continue. You can't obtain it, Dak finally said, deliberately withholding information. Why? Tesoro, driven by a deep obsession with reviving Stella, asked urgently. Such items that defy the laws of nature shouldn't be casually circulated, Dak explained. Even though I don't particularly care about that, I won't let these items spread so easily. Dak had now landed on the ground and approached the trio. Do you know why, for the past 10 years, pirates have been born endlessly in this world? One Piece, Tesoro answered instinctively. That's part of it. The title and status of Pirate King also contributed to the Great Pirate Era, Dak said. But I'm aiming to create the Pokémon Era, which means an endless generation of trainers and Pokémon. Only when trainers become the norm and people can't live without Pokémon will I have succeeded. So, you trying to create something that surpasses One Piece? Tesoro seemed to understand a bit more, but was still puzzled by Dak's intentions. Exactly. I aim to establish the Pokémon Era and have the Pokémon Alliance dominate it. Sheer force alone isn't enough. The world government is the strongest, yet the Great Pirate Era was created by Roger. Dak smiled. To achieve this, I need to monopolize miraculous items, making everyone who seeks them support and uphold the Pokémon Alliance. Tesoro nodded, fully comprehending Dak's vision. By controlling such items and giving people what the world government couldn't, the Pokémon Alliance would ensure its dominance and bring peace. Without these rare items, their value diminishes. If anyone could be a pirate king, it would become a meaningless title. The world government lacks this. Despite 800 years of strength, they haven't gained universal support. The Pokémon Alliance's items, unique titles, and peace offerings will make people protect the Alliance. If the Alliance falls, so does everything they value. Many will try to destroy the Alliance to seize these items. But when they realize they can't win, they'll have no choice but to support us, Dak explained. Currently, all Pokémon originate from the Alliance. Future factions will rely on Pokémon for their power and status, ensuring they protect the Alliance. Why can't I obtain it? Tesoro asked, looking desolate. If Dak was unwilling to release these items, what could he do? The Pokémon Alliance was beyond their capability, and the Navy's ambiguous stance complicated matters. If you don't let others use them, how will they know they exist? But to obtain these items, you must follow my rules. and opportunities are rare, only 2 or 3 times a year. Hunger marketing. Tesoro nodded, understanding Dak's strategy. But why can't I obtain it? All events and contests in the Pokémon Alliance involve Pokémon. You don't have any. Even if you bought an egg now, you might not raise it to win. Dak was trying to intimidate Tesoro. Tesoro's chances of winning were decent because he was wealthy and resourceful. He could provide everything a Pokémon needed to grow strong and hire experts to help him. But Dak saw no need to share this because he intended to recruit Tesoro. Tesoro clenched his fists, contemplating his options. With only a few chances a year, how many more do you have? Dak whispered, "You're being hunted by the Don Quixote family. You might die at sea next year and lose all your chances." The devil whispered in Tesoro's ear, making his pupils contract. Dak was right. He had assumed he'd live for decades, but forgot his perilous situation. "Isn't there another way?" Tesoro asked desperately. "Would you do anything to save the person you love?" "I would, no matter the cost," Tesoro affirmed, his eyes shining with hope. "The previous method is the only way for outsiders. But you understand, right?" Dak revealed his true intention. Tesoro immediately understood. "I'll join the breeding house. If it means reviving Stella, I'll even become a slave again." Tesoro's willingness to use the term slave again, after having been won for the Celestial Dragons, highlighted his deep love for Stella. But Dak stopped him from kneeling. "Welcome, my Minister of Finance. We were meant to be partners." Dak's demeanor changed, cheerfully embracing Tesoro. However, Dak's thoughts turned to another matter, reviving Robin's mother, Alvia. Into Chapter 133. Chapter 133. Previously, Dak had not thought about this aspect, but now he realized he seemed to have forgotten about Robin's mother. Robin hadn't mentioned anything about it these past 2 days either. "You can call me Dak from now on. In the breeding house, we are all partners. Only in the Pokémon Alliance are there hierarchical relationships," Dak said, shaking his head and deciding to talk about it later. He then looked at Tesoro. "All right, these are my subordinates, Baccarat and Mr. Tanaka," Tesoro introduced. "Greetings, leader." Baccarat and Mr. Tanaka both bowed respectfully. They had overheard Dak and Tesoro's conversation and understood that they were now part of the Pokémon Alliance. "You all came at the perfect time. You have no idea how short-staffed the Pokémon Alliance is right now. With you and your subordinates here, I feel much more at ease. My plans for other branches can move forward," Dak said. Opening new branches required capable, trustworthy people to serve as branch managers. Both Baccarat and Mr. Tanaka were suitable for such roles, especially in the 4 Seas. Additionally, with Galdino and Makita on board, the branch managers for the 4 Seas were now complete. Dak just needed to pair them with strong Pokémon partners to ensure they could manage the branches effectively. Tesoro listened silently. Although his mind was preoccupied with reviving Stella, he remained silent, waiting for Dak to address the matter. "You will be our Minister of Finance. For now, the entire department consists only of you. You will manage it, and the recruitment of additional personnel will be up to you. The only requirement is that their character must be decent. No scoundrels allowed," Dak said as he turned towards the breeding house, gesturing for the trio to follow. "Leader, what about us?" Baccarat and Mr. Tanaka asked anxiously. "Can't we stay with the boss? You will manage branch stores in the 4 Seas. Don't worry, each branch will have a portal directly connecting to the Pokémon Island base. You will also have a token that allows you to enter the breeding house at any time," Dak said, handing each of them a pocket token and explaining its purpose. The trio was shocked. A shop in the void between worlds sounded incredibly cool. Initially, Baccarat and Mr. Tanaka were nervous about being stationed so far away, but learning about the portal made them eager to try it out. Normally, members of the Pokémon Alliance did not qualify for pocket tokens. Dak planned to limit their distribution in the future, only granting them to core members of the breeding house and key officials in the Pokémon Alliance. For example, Zambai, a future squad leader of the inspection team, would receive a token, but his subordinates would not. Baccarat and Mr. Tanaka, as future branch managers, were entitled to tokens. "Dak," Tesoro finally spoke up, unable to contain his thoughts about Stella. "I understand. Don't worry, Devil Child Nico Robin is also our partner. Let's go back and ask her if she wants to revive her mother. If she agrees, we can revive both together, Dak reassured him. Okay, Tesoro replied. As long as Dak didn't forget about reviving Stella, he could manage. Involving another partner's family made it unlikely that Dak would deceive him. You can have Stella as your secretary, or let her live on Pokémon Island and make friends. When you get married, let me know. I'll arrange a grand wedding for you on the island, Dak said. Marriage is a bit early, Tesoro stammered, suddenly nervous, showing none of the demeanor of a 30-year-old man. After some casual conversation, Dak led the trio to the breeding house to introduce them to Icebug. This is Icebug, also our partner. He's an excellent shipwright, but I think he'll be great at commerce too. I plan to make him the Deputy Minister of Finance, so you'll be working together. Feel free to discuss ideas with him, Dak said. Icebug looked bewildered. He hadn't heard anything about becoming the Deputy Minister of Finance. He thought his job was just to hammer things here and there. Dak then took Tesoro, Baccarat, and Mr. Tanaka to the depths of the shop. Now, try using your gold fruit ability to create a door and then open it with the pocket token, Dak instructed. Tesoro nodded, looking around before grabbing a table and transforming it into gold, shaping it into a door. This was the current ability of the gold fruit, temporarily transforming materials into gold, though it couldn't permanently alter their composition or create gold from nothing. After creating the golden door, Tesoro held the token and pushed it open, revealing the breeding house. It worked. In the future, if you're in danger, you can use this method to return to the shop, Dak said, stepping through the door and signaling for the others to follow. Inside the breeding house, Baccarat and Mr. Tanaka's faces turned strange, while Tesoro remained composed. Feel it in the breeding house. Unless you're a core member, everyone else's abilities and strength are suppressed to ordinary human levels. Here, we are invincible. If you're ever in danger, use the pocket token to open a door and you'll be safe, Dak explained. Tesoro frowned, looking at his companions. Now he understood why they seemed so uneasy. No wonder the Pokémon Alliance could brazenly kill world government agents. They weren't afraid of retaliation. Did this mean they could kill celestial dragons too? Tesoro's eyes gleamed with a sinister light, though he quickly dismissed the thought, not wanting to ruin Dak's plans. Let's head to Pokémon Island. Robin is there, Dak said. On Pokémon Island, in the Alliance base, Dak led Tesoro and the others through a portal into the first-floor lobby. That's Robin, and this is our Alliance base. Dak pointed out Robin at the reception desk. Dak, Robin said, curious about the newcomers. Robin, this is Tesoro, our new partner. These are Baccarat and Mr. Tanaka, who will manage the Four Seas branches. Dak introduced quickly before whispering to Robin. Robin, I'm planning to revive Tesoro's girlfriend. Do you want to revive your mother? I forgot to mention it earlier. Revive. Robin was stunned. She hadn't realized the revival claims in the newspaper were true. Seeing the deceased was already extraordinary. She hadn't dared to dream of resurrection. But then she looked around at her surroundings. If creating a whole new world was possible, why not resurrection? It seemed more acceptable now. If it's possible, I'd like to see my mother again, Robin whispered, not wanting to trouble Dak. I understand. Finish your work here and come back to the breeding house, Dak said, patting her shoulder before leaving. Resurrection was a first for Dak. Though the miracle shop offered items for reviving the dead, he hadn't tried them before. It was something he'd only seen in fiction. Let's find a place for Baccarat and Mr. Tanaka to stay in Water 7. Later, I'll build houses for you near the Alliance base, Dak said. These will be residences for high-ranking Alliance members. Leader, we can handle this ourselves. Yes, you and the boss have more important things to do, Baccarat and Mr. Tanaka insisted, eager for Tesoro to reunite with Stella. All right, take care then, Dak said, understanding their urgency. He took Tesoro back to the breeding house. They didn't have to wait long before Robin returned. Miracle Shop, Sacred Ash, 10,000 Miracle Coins, Revival Herb, 10,000 Miracle Coins. These items seemed modified. Careful selection was necessary. End of Chapter 134. Chapter 134, although, in the original series, Sacred Ash had a much higher status than Revival Herb. In the Miracle Shop, They both belonged to the rare items category and had their functions altered, making their prices identical. In the games, Sacred Ash could revive an entire team of Pokémon from fainting, restoring all their HP without any side effects. In the anime, it could completely resurrect a Pokémon and make it even stronger than before. Sacred Ash was said to be a product of the legendary Pokémon Ho-Oh, and being the cover Pokémon, it made sense for it to have such powerful effects. Revival Herb, on the other hand, could only revive one Pokémon from fainting, fully restoring its HP but lowering its friendship level. In the anime, it was used as an ingredient in making a special coffee or potion in the Unova region. Revival Herb was a naturally occurring treasure of the land, at most related to the Unova trio, and thus was less prestigious and effective compared to Sacred Ash. However, both items had a crucial limitation. They only worked on Pokémon. In the Miracle Shop, this restriction was removed. Sacred Ash, no prerequisites required, automatically captures the deceased soul and reconstructs their body, cannot capture souls from different worlds. However, the resurrected person has only a 10-year lifespan and an average human physical condition. Revival Herb requires the intact corpse of the deceased to perform the resurrection. The resurrected individual regains their original strength based on the corpse's condition. If the body is decayed, there's a high chance the individual might die again. The effects are straightforward. Sacred Ash has been significantly nerfed to match its price, while Revival Herb has been significantly enhanced, with almost no side effects post-resurrection, except for the prerequisite of having a corpse. The advantages and disadvantages are clear. Sacred Ash allows unrestricted resurrection of any deceased individual, but the revived person has only a 10-year lifespan and needs other means to extend it. Due to the body reconstruction aspect, DAC can't use Sacred Ash to mass-produce strong individuals, only ordinary people with memories. Regarding lifespan extension, only worlds with a certain level of development or fantasy-type worlds have such means. In the One Piece world, this is almost non-existent. Otherwise, the world government and the Don Quixote family wouldn't covet the Ope no Mi so much. Revival Herb doesn't have these concerns, but requires a corpse, which is a significant limitation in the One Piece world. Both Robin and Tesoro can't use this method. Nico Alvia's body likely turned to dust in O'Hara's ruins, and Stella's body was probably cremated by the Celestial Dragons. In the One Piece world, preserving bodies like in the Naruto world is rare. Most are left where they fall. No choice then, Dak muttered, checking his miracle coin balance. After creating the streets in Alliance City, Dak hadn't spent much money or checked the shop's income, so the balance hadn't changed. There were still many places where money was needed, such as equipment for the Pokémon Center, hiring staff for the friendly shop, Pokémon partners for branch managers, Pokémon Academy, and the Academy's Pokémon. Dak spent 20,000 miracle coins to buy 2 portions of Sacred Ash. Looking at the handfuls of glowing gray stardust in his hands, Dak felt a bit incredulous. Such items were beyond imagination in the past, but now they were right in his grasp. Robin and Tesoro, seeing the glowing ashes in Dak's hands, first felt puzzled, but soon their hearts filled with anticipation. "There's something I need to tell you first, and then you can decide whether to tell them," Dak said, handing over the ashes carefully. "What is it? What's wrong?" Both of them felt a chill, fearing something might go wrong. "This item can only revive them for 10 years. Dak pointed at the Sacred Ash. Tesoro fell silent, looking deflated. 10 years is still very good, Robin said, trying to stay optimistic. She never thought she'd have the chance to live with her mother again. "Don't worry too much. There are Pokémon in the world that can fix this, and not just one," Dak said, patting Tesoro's shoulder. To him, lifespan was a minor issue. Ho-Oh, Shalebi, Jirachi, and Xerneas could all extend a being's lifespan. Does the Pokémon Alliance have such Pokémon? Tesoro asked. No, Dak replied, not wanting to mislead Tesoro. However, Tesoro's question caught him off guard. Even the Pokémon Alliance doesn't. Tesoro thought the Pokémon Alliance had all the Pokémon. If they didn't, there was no hope elsewhere. Pokémon in the Alliance are directly summoned by Dak. Robin clarified, sensing Tesoro's misconception. Though it seemed incredible, Robin had seen Dak's extraordinary abilities. Really? Isn't that costly? Dak shook his head. What cost? No matter the price. I'll bear it all myself and won't burden anyone, Tesoro said, desperate. Money, Dak said. Money. You can think of it as a transaction where I pay a deity from another world, and in return, they send me the Pokémon, Dak explained, avoiding revealing the system. A deity? Arceus. Robin remembered Dak's story from the performance match, where he mentioned Arceus creating all Pokémon in the world. Yes, exactly. Dak agreed, letting Arceus take the blame. If it's just money, I understand. How do I use this? Tesoro asked, relieved. Go to your room, hold it in your hand at midnight, and it will activate, resurrecting the person you have in mind, Dak instructed. Not knowing Tesoro's inner resolve, Dak would have been thrilled to know his determination to earn 1 trillion berries in 10 years to bring such a life-extending Pokémon to the Alliance. Tomorrow, bring the resurrected ones to me. The Alliance is short-staffed, and I need their help, Dak said, not holding back. Trustworthy people were scarce, and Alvia and Stella seemed reliable and could be trusted. Okay, Mother will likely be very interested in Pokémon knowledge and might become a Pokémon professor, Robin said, hoping her mother would stay away from pursuing the Void Century's truth until the world government was overthrown. Understood, Tesoro agreed. He didn't need Stella to work, but it might help her adapt to her new life and reduce any guilt she might feel. Night fell. Dak slept early, not planning to stay up for Alvia and Stella's resurrection. There was no need for a late-night greeting. It was better to let them catch up and understand the current situation. The next morning, Dak found 2 new faces in the shop. One had white hair, the other blonde. Revived at their death age, Alvia and Stella appeared as young women in their 20s. Robin was reading as usual, with Alvia sitting beside her. Seeing Dak, Alvia stood and bowed. Tesoro and Stella were sitting under a tree, close together, showing their affection. Leader, they both said respectfully, knowing Dak had revived them. No, call me Dak, like Robin and Tesoro. You're now part of the breeding house, and we're partners, Dak said, waving off formalities. He disliked titles among companions, preferring simplicity. End of Chapter 135. Chapter 135 now. You should have a basic understanding of our situation, but Stella might not fully grasp it yet, as Tesoro only joined yesterday, Dak said, looking at the 2 women before him. He then handed each of them a thick book, How to Become a Beloved Pokémon Academy Teacher and How to Be a 5-Star Friendly Shop Manager. The 2 women took the hefty books from Dak, momentarily speechless. The Pokémon Alliance is severely understaffed, but positions like teachers at the Pokémon Academy and managers at the shop are crucial. These roles must be entrusted to reliable individuals, Dak explained. He coughed lightly and continued. Alvia, I hope you can quickly study and prepare to serve as the vice principal, grade director, and teacher at the Pokémon Academy, assisting Robin, the principal, in managing the academy. Stella, you should learn more about business management. When the shop opens, I'll need you to oversee it. Dak had thought this arrangement over the previous night. Alvia, being a scholar and archaeologist, was well suited for teaching due to her extensive knowledge and cultured demeanor. As for Stella, although her talents were not as apparent, with Tesoro's help, she would likely manage the shop well. No problem, Dak. I'll teach the students well, Alvia agreed earnestly, understanding the importance of education. I'll try my best, sir, Stella said, though she lacked confidence. The presence of Tesoro gave her some reassurance, and she didn't want to fail and feel unworthy of Dak's kindness. Both Alvia and Stella held a deep respect for Dak, similar to Monet, as they were all saved by him. This respect made it hard for them to casually address him by name. Dak decided to let it slide for now. Dak then spent another 20,000 miracle coins to provide Alvia and Stella each with a Rotom as an assistant Pokemon. Rotom could help them with teaching and managing the shop, ensuring they performed their duties better. Previously, Bon Clay was responsible for inventory at the shop. Stella, you can learn from him, as he has experience in this area, Dak suggested. He could see Stella was still affected by the trauma from the celestial dragons. Lacking confidence, Tesoro, Come with me, Dak said, taking Tesoro aside to discuss further responsibilities. At the Pokemon Island Alliance base, Dak laid out a map of the One Piece world on the table. Our next goal is to establish Pokemon branches in the 4 Seas. Here are the cities I've selected, and these are the candidates for branch managers. Dak explained, presenting information on Galdino, Mikita, Mr. Tanaka, and Baccarat. How are Galdino and Mikita in terms of combat strength? Tesoro asked, reviewing the details. Galdino is decent, but Mikita is relatively weak and not good at fighting, Dak admitted. We shouldn't establish branches on these 2 islands in the North and West Seas, Tesoro suggested, marking 2 major trade islands with an X, due to their lack of strength? Dak guessed, considering Tesoro's earlier question. Exactly. The West Sea is full of assassins and gangs, and these trade islands are their prime targets. Our goods will definitely attract unwanted attention. The North Sea's trade market is controlled by the Don Quixote family, mostly involving gray market transactions, not suitable for normal people, Tesoro explained, highlighting issues Dak hadn't considered. He had been unaware of these islands' real conditions. Moreover, these islands are effectively under world government control. Establishing branches there would expose us to their interference and possible sabotage, Tesoro continued. With the current strained relations with the world government, avoiding these areas was wise. What about the East and South Seas? Dak asked. These areas are heavily patrolled by the Navy, thanks to Garp and Sengoku. They have fewer world government agents, making them safer for our operations, Tesoro noted, suggesting alternative locations in the North and West Seas. How should we assign personnel? Dak inquired. Mikita, being the weakest, should go to the East Sea. Baccarat can go to the South Sea. Galdino, being the strongest, should handle the North Sea, and Mr. Tanaka can take the West Sea. Each branch will need at least 500 personnel, all with Pokemon partners, so we need about 2,000 people. We can redistribute some from the East and South Seas to reinforce the North and West Seas, Tesoro proposed. We currently have 1,500 people, Dak admitted, considering increasing recruitment. We'll need to recruit more. The 4 Seas have many talents. Let's wait a few days to see if more suitable candidates arrive at Water 7, Tesoro suggested, showing his business acumen. All right, I'll leave it to you, Dak agreed, impressed by Tesoro's capabilities. With Tesoro managing things, Dak felt relieved and less burdened. Boss, Galdino suddenly rushed in, panting. What's wrong? The world government has issued bounties on you and Sceptile, Galdino exclaimed. Oh, Dak was unsurprised, even a bit excited. With Tesoro's help, he felt ready for the challenge. In a Chapter 136. Chapter 136. Hey. Coughing, stop sleeping, a voice called out. Coughing, nestled comfortably in his blanket, trembled slightly and involuntarily released a small puff of gas. The little guy didn't think much of it and continued to sleep. Really, you always release gas in your sleep, the voice continued. Gradually, Coughing woke up. Opening his eyes, he saw that the air around him was filled with a mix of white and purple gas. He snapped awake, realizing he had lost control of his gas emission while sleeping. Coughing felt downcast and snuggled deeper into his blanket, reluctant to come out. Come on, get up and wash up. Ekans and Meowth are already waiting for you at the door, the voice urged. Coughing, hearing that his friends were waiting, Coughing quickly emerged from his blanket. He didn't want to keep his hard-won friends waiting. As he left his bed, the first thing Coughing saw was Smoker with a cigar in his mouth. Smoker was in a semi-smoking state, only holding the cigar without lighting it whenever Coughing was around. Though the Pokemon Research Department had assured him that secondhand smoke wouldn't harm Coughing, Smoker, distrustful of the department since his training days, didn't take chances. Coughing affectionately floated over and nuzzled into Smoker's arms. Smoker skillfully picked Coughing up and took him to the bathroom. He grabbed a purple towel, dampened it, and roughly wiped Coughing's face. Coughing, accustomed to Smoker's rough methods, didn't mind the harsh rubbing. Rinse your mouth, Smoker said, rinsing the towel and putting it back in place. He then handed Coughing a green cup of water. Originally, the towel had been green, symbolizing health. However, Coughing had turned it purple on the first night. Gulp. I've told you so many times, don't swallow the mouthwash. Smoker scolded, patting Coughing's head. Coughing grinned foolishly. Never mind, go outside now. You promised Eakins and Meowth you'd go buy fruit today. Smoker sighed, carrying Coughing to the door. Opening the door, Smoker found no humans but two Pokémon waiting outside. An ordinary Eakins and a peculiar Meowth standing upright. Coughing, seeing his friends, Coughing eagerly floated out of Smoker's arms and greeted them. The three Pokémon chatted excitedly, seemingly discussing their activities from the previous day. All right, you all go have fun. If you run into any trouble, seek help from the nearby Marines, Smoker advised, not understanding how different species of Pokémon communicated but trusting their bonds. He handed Coughing a small pouch and closed the door, confident that nothing dangerous could happen in Marineford, teeming with Marines and their families. Coughing, Eakins, and Meowth headed toward the commercial street beside the Marine base. Today's mission was to buy some fruit, with Smoker having given Coughing money the day before. Coughing proudly displayed his purple pouch to his friends. Eakins showed her pink pouch, wrapped around her tail, a gift from her trainer, a female Marine fond of pink, who had hand-painted Eakins' likeness on it. Coughing envied her, but his trainer wasn't good at drawing. Meowth turned to show his backpack, a human child's bag. The three young Pokémon made their way to the fruit store, a common sight in Marineford. Coughing asked his friends where they could buy fruit. Eakins shook her head, unsure. Meowth patted his chest confidently, leading the way to a fruit store on the commercial street. Hey there, Meowth, brought your friends today? The kind-looking shopkeeper, an elderly lady, greeted them warmly. Meowth rubbed against her pant leg affectionately. Good boy. Here, take these dates and share them with your friends, she said, crouching to pat Meowth's head. Coughing and Eakins hesitated outside the shop, trained in good manners. Meowth returned with the dates and shared them, feeding each of his friends since they had no hands. Such good children. Come in. Let me see you, the elderly lady invited, her poor eyesight making it hard to see them clearly. Coughing and Eakins hesitated, worried about scaring her with their unusual appearances. Meowth shook his head, nudging his friends inside. He knew she wouldn't mind. Oh my, you two look quite unique, she remarked, fearlessly patting their heads. Coughing, Eakins, the two Pokémon relaxed, handing her their pouches to take the money while they chose the fruit with Meowth. The elderly lady watched them fondly, listening to their chatter and enjoying the warm sunlight on her face. She remembered a time when a giant Marine often visited, claiming to be her late son's superior. Though he no longer came, she found comfort in the company of these young Pokémon, recalling his words. The sea is vast, and life is never truly lonely. Elsewhere, in the Marine headquarters, high-ranking officers discussed a serious matter: how to handle their relationship with the Pokémon Alliance. The world government had issued a bounty on members of the Pokémon Alliance, including Dak, leader of the Pokémon Alliance, 3 billion berries Sceptile, the Konoha Emperor, 1 billion berries Darkrai, the Nightmare King, 1 billion berries Giratina, the King of the Underworld. 2 billion berries. The world government had somehow learned about the exhibition match and valued Giratina higher than Sceptile and Darkrai. You must have noticed by now, those arrogant fools have started recognizing the threat posed by the Pokémon Alliance. Issuing such high bounties is unprecedented in our 800-year history. This time, remaining inactive will be difficult unless we completely sever ties with the world government, Sengoku stated, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. The officers present were trusted individuals advocating for a change in allegiance. We should wait and see what Dak plans to do, Tsuru suggested, supporting her head with her hands and feeling an impending sense of significant change. End of Chapter 137. Chapter 137. Ha ha ha. Such arrogant fools. They're so reluctant to acknowledge the name of God for these Pokémon, Dak muttered to himself, seated on a piece of red land known as the Red Line. He was not alone. The Pokémon known as the three gods of the Pokémon Alliance accompanied him: Sceptile, Darkrai, and Giratina. Despite their power, the world government refused to recognize them as gods. With the world government publicly declaring the hunt for Pokémon and Alliance members, Dak wasn't going to sit idly by. He planned a major operation to send a clear message, demonstrating the Pokémon Alliance's strength and daring. This would shock the world, making everyone aware of the Alliance's power and deter anyone from targeting them. The goal was to enhance the Alliance's reputation and position. Currently, while people acknowledged the Alliance's strength, they still subconsciously believed it couldn't surpass the world government, which had ruled for 800 years. After today, they would realize the Pokémon Alliance was far superior. This action would significantly damage the world government's prestige, causing chaos. Many would seize the opportunity to become pirates, wreaking havoc. This was a scenario Dak wanted to avoid. He didn't want the world to descend into chaos, which was why he hadn't yet destroyed the world government and the celestial dragons. Their oppressive rule kept potential troublemakers in check, preventing widespread wars and conflicts. Dak had a solution, a system where the Pokémon Alliance would collect protection fees in exchange for peace and order. This would involve establishing world laws that all member nations must follow. Implementing this required significant manpower, military strength, world recognition, and a widespread presence of Pokémon and trainers. Until these conditions were met, the world government and celestial dragons would remain necessary. Today's operation had three main objectives: liberating slaves, killing celestial dragons, and securing Vegapunk. Freeing slaves wasn't just altruistic, it would garner gratitude and loyalty, potentially swelling the ranks of the Pokémon Alliance. Even those who didn't join would likely become trainers, supporting the Alliance's cause. The exact number of slaves was unknown, but the liberation would have far-reaching effects. Killing celestial dragons would send a powerful message, instilling fear and respect for the Alliance. As for Vegapunk, his genius was unparalleled. His inventions, from land heating systems to artificial devil fruits, showcased his unmatched talent. Capturing him would be a significant boon for the Alliance, providing technological advancements and further consolidating their power. As Dak read the newspaper, distant footsteps rumbled through the red line. He sensed that the world government's forces had mobilized in full strength, just as he had hoped. I'll leave it to you three. If there are any Marines among them, hold back a bit. They're probably just here to put on a show, Dak instructed, referring to Sceptile, Darkrai, and Giratina. With that, Dak leaned back, a door of air opening behind him, allowing him to vanish from the physical world. The three Pokémon exchanged glances before focusing on the approaching white-clad soldiers, the elite of the world government, led by the CP0 agents. In the original story, CP0 was seen as the pinnacle of the world government strength, but later revelations showed a decline in their perceived power. Not every CP0 member possessed overwhelming strength. Some, like former CP9 members, didn't measure up. Only select captains and officers held significant power, some possibly rivaling admirals. The hierarchy of the world government's top combatants likely went: I'm Gorosei, 5 elders, Holy Knights, CP0 commanders. The undisputed leader for 800 years, was an unknown entity, possibly a max-level combatant like Sceptile or Darkrai. The Gorosei, chosen from the Holy Knights, each commanded one of the world government's 5 domains, likely on par with peak-level figures like Whitebeard or Garp. The Holy Knights, selected from the Celestial Dragons' 20 families, numbered around 20, each responsible for maintaining the Celestial Dragon's rule. Their leader possibly matched the Gorosei in power, with other members ranging from level 85 to 90, and a few nearing Admiral-level strength. CP0 commanders, such as future Rob Lucci, were formidable but generally below the top-tier level, often acting as enforcers. With the imminent confrontation, the true extent of the world government's power would be revealed, setting the stage for a decisive battle that would reshape the world perception of the Pokémon Alliance. End of Chapter 138. Chapter 138. The world government's army had already closed in, with Dax sitting at the gates of the floating city of Mariewa, along with the 3 Pokémon, It was impossible for the world government not to notice them. Their speed in organizing troops was impressive. Dak had only been reading the newspaper for a few minutes before the forces mobilized. In the space within the dimensional gate, Dak estimated that the world government had gathered around 100,000 soldiers to confront them. Does this city really have that many people? Maybe they've emptied out all the troops from Mihawk, Dak mused. Mihawk is a city in the sky, with clouds floating everywhere, and the world government's headquarters, Pangea Castle, sits atop these clouds. Dak suspected that the reason the celestial dragons always wore glass helmets was due to a lack of oxygen, rather than to avoid breathing the same air as inferior beings, which was probably just a lie to deceive the ignorant among the celestial dragons. The so-called Pangea Castle was essentially a fortress, smaller than the planned Alliance City on Pokémon Island, possibly only one-third its size. Even at that size, holding 10,000 people would already be a stretch. The bulk of the world government's forces were deployed globally, with those stationed in Mihawk being the elite. This force of 100,000 soldiers could be compared to the 10,000 elite Marines during the War of the Best. But if they're only at this level, they're just cannon fodder, Dak grinned. Wiping out these 100,000 would force the world government to recall their forces from around the world to defend Mihawk, easing the battlefield pressure on the Revolutionary Army, which would in turn speed up their liberation of various cities. However, this might also result in many Marines being redeployed, which could lead to pirates becoming more rampant, causing even more havoc for the common people. Dak would need to compensate for this to prevent an explosion in pirate numbers. Outside the gate, Giratina and the other two Pokémon exchanged glances, deciding who would act first. In the face of absolute strength, numbers were meaningless. Whether it was Giratina or Darkrai, they each had the power to wipe out these 100,000 soldiers in one move. Although Sceptile was less efficient in such scenarios, the outcome would still be the same. It just needed more time since its abilities were more suited for one-on-one battles. Giratina, being the youngest, deferred to the other two. Darkrai, although the leader, was gentle and lacked assertiveness. Sceptile, on the other hand, had a more dominant personality and thus took command. Sceptile signaled, and the other two nodded. Darkrai immediately melted into the shadows, setting off to find the scientist named Vegapunk and rescue him. Giratina floated forward, positioning itself between the army and Mihawk. Next, Giratina would annihilate this army of ants. Now outside Pokémon Island, Giratina had assumed its alternate for me, standing firmly on the ground. Although this reduced its overall power, it appeared even more imposing, its new ability, Pressure, exerting a constant mental strain on its foes. This ability was akin to a toned-down version of Conqueror's Haki, continuously affecting weaker opponents' minds. Just by standing there, Giratina's ability put a debuff on the entire army. As for Sceptile, it stayed put, waiting. It knew there were still strong opponents within Mihawk who hadn't shown themselves yet. Sceptile was eagerly waiting for those worthy foes to come out so it could take them down. Ever since arriving in this world, Sceptile hadn't faced any strong opponents, making its daily life quite dull. "Hurry and scatter," one of the CP0 leaders commanded. "Watch out for its breath attack." Is this really our opponent? It looks different from the pictures in the newspapers. We have 100,000 soldiers within the world government army. Whispers of fear and doubt spread. Many of them were mercenaries working for money, and now they faced an enemy that defied their expectations. Roar! Giratina let out a thunderous roar, its 6 legs stomping heavily on the ground. An earthquake. Sceptile, realizing the impending danger, leaped high into the air. Boom! The red line, the massive continent dividing the Grand Line and the New World, began to tremble. Cracks started to form, radiating from where Giratina stood, spreading outward rapidly. In no time, the once unyielding landmass split apart. The sea from the New World and the Grand Line began to merge, breaking the natural barrier that had stood for centuries. The fissures spread quickly, and the ground beneath the 100,000 soldiers opened up, sending countless men plummeting into the abyss. Use Moonwalk. The CP0 leader at the forefront quickly reacted, using Moonwalk to ascend into the sky. These elite soldiers, all trained in the 6 powers, followed suit, scrambling to stay airborne. Some even stepped on their comrades to gain height, desperate to avoid the trembling ground. However, those who reacted too slowly were caught by the tremors. Their legs shattered, and many were killed instantly as their hearts burst from a shock. In one move, Giratina had wiped out 50,000 world government soldiers. Buzz! Giratina stopped its stomping, letting out another deafening roar. Boom burst. Invisible waves of sound energy spread out, unseen but deadly. These waves tore through the air, causing havoc and destruction, killing nearly everyone in their path. 99% of the remaining 50,000 soldiers were turned into bloody mist, leaving only a few survivors who had either strong enough abilities to withstand the initial attack or were lucky enough to avoid it. Among the survivors, a few managed to stay conscious, but they were severely injured and fell freely from the sky, effectively out of the fight. Natural ability users stared blankly, their will to fight completely crushed. This is too unfair. The world government can't possibly win against these monsters. Pokémon, the seas have changed. Ha ha! This is the power of gods. Ha ha! I will embrace the gods. Among the few survivors, one ability user laughed maniacally, jumping into the fissure to the sea below. Dark watched from his dimensional space, noting the spectacle. Another fruit user gone, adding another rare fruit back into the world. Sceptile, high in the air, felt helpless. Whether it was earthquake or boomburst, these were all area of effect, moves with no discrimination. Although Sceptile avoided the earthquake, it couldn't escape the boomburst, suffering minor injuries. What could Sceptile do but forgive Giratina? After all, Giratina was still a child, with no control over its power. Whoa! Giratina, realizing it might have overdone it, looked around in confusion. Creak! The dimensional gate opened, and Dak stepped onto Giratina's back, gently patting its neck. You went overboard, Giratina, Dak sighed, glancing at the massive fissure that now split the red line. Breaking the barrier between the New World and the Grand Line had not been part of Dak's plan. He had underestimated Giratina's power. Those guys must be stunned, Dak said, looking towards Mariewa. Giratina's earthquake had inadvertently caused significant damage to the city itself. Into Chapter 139. Chapter 13 10 minutes earlier. At Mariewa, inside Pangea Castle, the 5 elders had just received news that Leader Dak had appeared not far from the eastern side of Mariewa. How arrogant, daring to deliver himself right to our doorstep. It seems he wants to die. He's overconfident in his abilities and knows nothing about the power of the world government. Pokémon, these creatures that suddenly appeared out of nowhere, can't possibly be stronger than us who have ruled the world for so long. Most likely, that guy is just some devil fruit user who created these creatures using his powers. A minor issue. Don't let it bother you. We'll capture him alive, force him to hand over those tools. If he deceives us, we'll kill him. The 5 old men sat calmly in front of their sofa, leisurely discussing Dak and the 3 Pokemon's self-destructive actions. They didn't take Dak and the Pokemon's strength seriously. For the powers below them, Pokemon were a force to be reckoned with. If they could obtain this power, they could rule the world for another 8,000 years. But they thought the ceiling for Pokemon strength was at most that of Sceptile. Although Sceptile had effortlessly defeated 3 CP0 members, the 5 elders still didn't think it was that strong. Any one of them could easily kill 3 CP0 members. The admirals could as well, so Sceptile was just at the admiral level at best. Even if there were 3 such Pokemon, even if Giratina was stronger, it might be at the level of Whitebeard or Garp. They believed they could still handle it. So, the 5 elders are just sitting in their office, waiting for good news. They had dispatched 100,000 troops. Among them were most of the CP0 leaders. This force was enough to take down even an admiral or the fleet admiral. Boom! A distant rumble reached their ears. X5 the 5 elders opened their eyes simultaneously, looking at the water cups on the table, quietly observing. Boom! The rumbling grew louder, and they clearly saw the water in the cups ripple. They frowned, not expecting the battle's aftermath to be so intense that it affected Pangea Castle. It seemed those Pokémon were indeed troublesome, but they shouldn't pose a significant problem. Boom! Crash! Shatter! The third rumble was of an entirely different magnitude than the first two. The water cups on the table were shaken to the ground, shattering into shards of glass, and water spilled across the floor. Should we dispatch the Knights of God? Boom! The fourth rumble. None of the 5 elders could remain seated. They all stood up from their sofas. They could distinctly feel the entire Pangea Castle shaking. Pangea Castle was made of ultra-heavy alloy, with each wall weighing tens of tons. Yet, the castle was shaking. What did this mean for the rest of Mariewa? The 5 elders were alarmed, hastily moving to the windows to look outside. In the next moment, their eyes widened in shock. The clouds that usually enveloped Mariewa had been dispersed by the shockwaves, revealing the entire city. Countless buildings had collapsed, and many celestial dragons were running around in panic. And most crucially, the slaves had all escaped their cells. Every slave's eyes shone with a strange light. If it weren't for the explosive collars still around their necks, they would have already started killing celestial dragons or escaping. Mariewa was in chaos, and the tremors continued. In just a few seconds, the 5 elders watched as the ground beneath Mariewa cracked, luxurious white marble sinking into the fissures. Even some clumsy celestial dragons fell into the gaps. The fissures weren't deep enough to be fatal, but injuries were inevitable. Send the Knights of God to the battlefield outside immediately. J. Garcia Saturn, one of the 5 elders, ordered. He was the warrior god of science defense among the 5 elders, responsible for utilizing scientific technology to protect Mariewa. With the city under attack, it was natural for him to take charge. Saturn not only had immense scientific knowledge, but also formidable combat strength. He viewed humans as livestock and was the primary cause of the tragedy that befell Kuma's family. Since the plot involving Kuma was revealed, Saturn had become one of the most hated figures among fans, rivaling the disdain held for Orochi. Buzz! Giratina's boom burst attack reached Mariewa. Its power had diminished over the distance, but for the ordinary celestial dragons, it was disastrous. Their ears began to bleed, likely causing permanent hearing loss. Some of the weaker slaves were equally affected, but they didn't care. They couldn't feel pain. Seeing the celestial dragons in such a miserable state, they suppressed their urge to laugh hysterically. They didn't care if they went deaf. Some slaves, who had long since lost the will to live, seized the moment, grabbing stones to attack the celestial dragons who had fallen into the cracks. Slash! In the nick of time, a flying slash killed the attacking slave. A group dressed in predominantly black attire approached. There were about 20 of them. Leading them was an elderly man with sunglasses, his hair and beard forming a forward-pointing crescent. Figureland Garling. Once a ruler of the God Valley in the West Blue, he was now the leader of the Knights of God, a position equal to the 5 elders, though his strength was unknown. The God Valley incident was just a game for the celestial dragons. The original inhabitants of God Valley, Kuma's family, and other slaves were the prey, while the Knights of God and the celestial dragons were the hunters. Killing the prey earned points, which could be used for various rewards. The ultimate prize was 6 chests containing devil fruits. The famous battle at God Valley was mainly a fight between the Knights of God and the Rocks Pirates. Roger and Garp joined the battle with the simple goal of defeating Rocks. Several devil fruits were taken during the battle. One of the 6 devil fruits was eaten by Kuma on the spot, allowing him to save 500 people. It was the pop-off fruit. As for the other 5, one might have been Luffy's Gomu Gomu no Mi, taken by the Roger Pirates. Another 2 might have been Kaido's fish fruit. In the end, Big Mom found the place where the devil fruits were hidden. Kuma was attacked by Big Mom and had to eat the pawpaw fruit to save people. Considering Kaido's debt to Big Mom, it might have been for this devil fruit. Although Big Mom didn't get the pawpaw fruit, she took the fish fruit. The remaining 3 could be the Ope no Mi or other fruits. 10 years later, Garling executed Don Quixote Mjosgard during a meeting for protecting the fishmen and releasing the assassin of St. Charlos. Mjosgard was the celestial dragon saved by Odoheim on Fishman Island. It was rare to see a celestial dragon on the path to becoming a normal human, but Garling executed him. It didn't matter much. Though Mjosgard showed signs of redemption, it didn't change the fact that he had done many evil deeds. His death was no great loss. Garling's surname might remind people of Noland, the liar from Skypiea, but the two were unrelated, just like Bellamy and Jinramy. Their names were similar, but they had no connection. Return to your places. Slaves should act like slaves. Garling sheathed his sword. He was clearly a master swordsman, even stronger than Mihawk. Behind him were 19 younger figures, likely the elite of the 20 families. The slaves exchanged glances, reluctantly returning to the ruins of their cells, heads down. But they occasionally glanced beyond Mariewa. They longed for freedom. In the sky, a quiet sound emerged. Everyone instinctively looked up to see a strange creature floating down. Shadow sneak. Giratina, see that castle ahead? Use hyperbeam. Woo! Giratina didn't even charge up, instantly unleashing a massive red beam. The hyper beam used during the tournament was suppressed. Now it was at full power. The enormous beam struck Pangea Castle. Even Garling couldn't react in time to block it. Besides, he felt he couldn't stop it. Garling instinctively turned to look at Pangea Castle. The massive castle had a hole thousands of meters wide, teetering on the edge of collapse. The Five Elders' office, located on the top floor, was outside the hyperbeam's range, sparing them. They were lucky, but Giratina's hyperbeam probably couldn't kill all 5 of them at once, just severely injure them. Thus, Mariewa was effectively destroyed. Rebuilding the city in the sky would take at least a year or 2. Dax suspected that the world government might never dare to place their headquarters here again. In a chapter 140. Chapter 140, who is that? I don't know. A god, perhaps. Yes, it must be the Almighty. The true God has come to destroy these false gods. Ha ha ha. Let all the celestial dragons die. Boom. A slave who was laughing maniacally while looking at Giratina in the sky had his neck collar explode before he could finish a sentence. God, that title is reserved only for us celestial dragons, mocked a young man from the Knights of God as he looked at the other slaves with disdain. He thought he could intimidate the slaves as he had before, but he was wrong. This time, all the slaves did not lower their heads. Instead, they stared at him with intense gazes. Just stared. They didn't say a word or make a move, only standing there silently watching the celestial dragon. The scene turned eerie. Screams of the celestial dragons filled the air, but the slaves stood quietly, their eyes fixed on the man. How many slaves are in Mariewa? It depends on the number of celestial dragons. Even the lowest-ranking celestial dragons usually have at least 50 active slaves. An active slave is one who hasn't been tortured to death or driven to insanity and can still endure further torment. The exact number of celestial dragons is unknown, but it's certainly not less than 100. The celestial dragons have ruled for 800 years, protected and provided for. They never had to worry about survival or the cost of raising children. They were even mandated to have offspring to maintain their lineage. Under such conditions, the number of celestial dragons is considerable. A couple of years ago, during a slave liberation event, thousands of slaves escaped. Most died during their flight or were recaptured. Now, there are definitely over 10,000 slaves standing on the ruins of Mariewa. Being stared at by tens of thousands of people in silence would make anyone's skin crawl. You wretches dare to look directly at me? The young knight's composure shattered. Sweat trickled down his forehead as he gripped the remote control for the explosive collars, ready to press it. Stop! A woman with squinted eyes beside him placed a hand on his. These slaves were on the brink of collapse, ready to die. If pushed further, they might grab the nearest celestial dragon and wait for the collars to explode, dragging the celestial dragon to hell with them. How many slaves are there? How many celestial dragons? A few dead celestial dragons wouldn't matter, but if all the celestial dragons died, What would the Knights of God be for? In the past, CP members were everywhere, preventing slaves from getting close to the celestial dragons. But now, most CP members were likely dead outside. These 20 people couldn't stop 10,000 slaves, especially since most of these slaves were not ordinary people. On the contrary, many had significant strength. If not, they wouldn't have been taken as slaves by the celestial dragons. Even those without strength were often fed devil fruits or injected with modified genes, making them stronger. At the very least, they were stronger than the useless celestial dragons. Most importantly, Figureland Garling looked up, his cautious eyes hidden behind sunglasses, fixed on the oppressive creature in the sky. Can we really stop that monster? The Knights of God felt unprecedented pressure, more significant than the battle at God Valley over 20 years ago. That battle was evenly matched, with pressure from the entire Rocks Pirates and all its members. But this time, the pressure came from a single mysterious creature. Are we really not gods? Some members of the Knights of God, raised by the CPU since childhood, began to doubt their bloodline. In the sky. Well done, Giratina. Dak patted Giratina's back and looked down at the ruins of Mariella, muttering, I wonder how Darkrai is doing. We can't let him continue causing havoc. Knights of God, attack! From the shattered castle, Saturn's furious voice echoed. The Knights of God silently drew their weapons. Garling unsheathed his sword, leaping towards the sky. Swoosh! 2 leaves, sharp as deadly scythes, flew towards Garling, who barely managed to block them with his sword using observation hockey. Clang! The leaves were deflected, but Garling was knocked back dozens of meters before landing. Leaf Emperor. Sweat dripped from Garling's forehead to the ground. His sunglasses were shattered by the impact of blocking the attack. When the names of these 3 Pokémon were first announced, he had been extremely displeased, thinking how these beasts had the right to be called King, Emperor, and Dragon. Now he understood. Not only did he understand, but he was also beginning to worry that after today, they might not even be able to hold onto the title of God. Sceptile. Sceptile crossed his arms and slowly stepped into the battlefield, an amused look in his arrogant eyes. He hadn't held back with his leaf blade attack, yet Garling had blocked it. This showed Garling's combat strength was not low. At least he was qualified to fight Sceptile. Moreover, Garling was a swordsman. Thinking of this, Sceptile couldn't help but get excited. Sceptile, this area is yours. If possible, kill those in black clothes. Kill as many as you can, but prioritize your safety. From the sky, Dak on Giratina's back called down to Sceptile below. Sceptile raised his chin, glancing at the Knights of God, not taking them seriously. He could see their level at a glance, comparable to Mihawk. They were no different from chickens to him. Killing them was as easy as killing chickens, hardly worth his interest. Mihawk, in Sceptile's eyes, was at least a chicken with ambition, a chicken who wielded a sword and would likely become the king of chickens, possibly even a dragon. But the Knights of God were just a bunch of wild chickens, destined to be nothing more. 5 elders. Dak pondered whether to kill the 5 elders. If he killed them today, the world government would be leaderless, and Dak would lose control of the situation on the seas. Killing one should be fine. The one in the sky. A scream from the ground interrupted Dak's thoughts, making him look down. A celestial dragon, his face smeared with snot and tears, clutched a remote control. 2 question marks popped up in Dak's mind, wondering what this guy was planning. Get out now, or I'll kill all the slaves. The celestial dragon's words made every slave clench their fists, their eyes fixed on his face. But they hesitated to make a move. Given today's situation, they had a chance to survive. But if they acted, the explosive collars might kill them. If they could live, no one wanted to die, unless they were truly desperate. Now hope was in the sky. Not everyone was afraid of death, but many were. They were worried it would ruin Dak's plan. Unbeknownst to them, Dak had no real plan, only 3 targets, making it up as he went along. A flexible plan. The slaves couldn't help but look at the figure in the sky. They didn't know if Dak would save them. If he truly is a god, please save us. Or, Lord Demon, please kill these false gods. In the ruins, A pregnant woman clasped her hands in prayer. Oh dear, oh dear. Dak felt a headache coming. Reading the emotions through his psychic abilities, he realized the celestial dragon wasn't bluffing. His emotions had collapsed, and he was capable of anything. Dak wasn't cold-hearted enough to ignore the children's wide eyes or the battered women's desperate looks. Dak's hesitation revealed to the celestial dragons that he cared about the slaves' lives. So all the celestial dragons raised their remote controls. Some even grabbed nearby children to use as shields. Darkrai. Dak knew he had made a mistake. He should have used his psychic abilities to control that celestial dragon or knocked him out with Conqueror's Hockey. But the 5 elders and the Knights of God all had similar remote controls. Dak couldn't control them all at once. However, Darkrai could change the situation in many ways. But Darkrai was busy finding Vegapunk. Dak, suddenly, Darkrai's voice echoed from Dak's shadow. Darkrai had hidden in Dak's shadow, always prioritizing his protection. Darkrai, can you handle this? Dak, it's already done. That's what Darkrai meant. Dak could now understand Darkrai. He didn't know why, but he just could. Maybe there was an unspoken bond and understanding between them. Oh, just as Dak's curious voice sounded, he heard a series of clicks. Click! All the explosive collars automatically unlocked and fell to the ground, losing their ability to explode. Vegapunk, seeing this, Saturn's furious voice echoed through the clouds. End of chapter 141. Chapter 141, the explosive collars were Saturn's creation, developed hundreds of years ago. Technically, he had the highest authority over these collars. But in the realm of technology, nothing is permanent or absolute. Since Vegapunk's birth, Saturn was no longer the foremost authority in the field of science. Vegapunk was the only one capable of rendering Saturn's research obsolete. Saturn was well aware of this, so he knew that Vegapunk had defected. No, in fact, Vegapunk never truly belonged to the world government. Well done, Darkrai. Dak gave a thumbs up to his shadow, and a hand emerged from it to return the gesture. I am the leader of the Pokémon Alliance. Everyone, look up here. Dak leaped from Giratina, using his psychic abilities to float in the sky. Now, it was his turn to make a grand statement. All the slaves obediently looked up. They hadn't even realized that the collars around their necks had fallen off, but they understood that they hadn't yet attained true freedom. The celestial dragons force you to kneel with their inherited authority and empty titles, but the Pokémon Alliance wants you to stand tall. Let the world witness this. They will regret opposing the Pokémon Alliance. Giratina, show them a power that surpasses everything. Giratina had been quietly listening to Dak, but didn't expect to be suddenly called upon for such a demonstration. Caught off guard, Giratina hastily cast a meteor shower. In an instant, dozens of meteors descended from the sky, though fortunately, their scale wasn't massive. Oh crap, Dak hadn't anticipated Giratina to go this far. He worried the red line might not withstand it. Defying the rise of the Pokémon Alliance means you will find no burial ground. Dak spread his arms wide. Today, he was determined to leave a lasting impression. I'm the mighty wave that sweeps the land. Darkrai, Dak called out internally. Sensing the call, Darkrai emerged from Dak's shadow, mimicking his pose and spreading his arms. An endless darkness enveloped the entire Mariewa. Darkrai was smart. He blocked most of the meteors to prevent them from hitting the slaves, but allowed a few large ones to target the 5 elders in Pangea Castle. Stop them! The 5 elders, their eyes wide with rage, watched as several meteors plummeted toward them. No longer able to remain calm, they leaped into the sky, using all their power to intercept Giratina's summoned meteors. The celestial dragons in Mariewa couldn't handle it anymore. Those with fragile minds collapsed, soiling themselves, and fainted. Those with slightly stronger wills began running out of Mariewa in a panic. I quit. I don't want to be a celestial dragon anymore. I'll never do it again, I swear. It's over. The era of the celestial dragons is over. Let me be a Pokemon in my next life. The celestial dragons were breaking down. Their pride, ingrained in their very bones, was crumbling just like the false arrogance of a weakling. Meanwhile, the slaves began to understand. They looked around at the hellish scene, yet felt as if they were in paradise. How were the scenes of the celestial dragons fleeing any different from their own past situations? What goes around comes around. Thank you, Lord God. Thank you, Pokémon Alliance. A fishman roared out his years of anger and resentment, charging at the fleeing celestial dragons with his sharp teeth. It's your turn now, ha ha ha. A blind slave, using his ears and observation hockey to locate his target, grabbed a celestial dragon and gouged out his eyes. Try the taste of your own medicine. How does it feel? A legless dwarf rode on the head of a celestial dragon, tearing off his ear. These scenes had occurred a few years ago, but with reversed roles. The abusers had become the abused. Darkrai looked up from within the darkness, glanced at Dak, then silently resumed his place. Outside the dark dome, above Mihawk, endless black clouds formed a vortex, like a black hole ready to devour the world. Bolts of black lightning struck the dark dome repeatedly. Fierce tornadoes, endless blizzards, every natural force seemed to be summoned by an unknown power, attacking the dark dome with all their might. But Darkrai's dark dome absorbed everything. Unless these disasters could shatter space itself, or if the world's inherent power far exceeded Darkrai's limits, making natural disasters more potent than the Dark Dome's capacity. Otherwise, the Dark Dome would remain unbroken. Darkrai felt all of this but didn't inform Dak. There was no need. He would intercept all the attacks anyway. In the depths of Pangea Castle's Garden of Flowers, everything was eerily silent. The five elders struggled to resist Giratina's meteor shower. The Knights of God were cornered and slaughtered by Sceptile alone, with only 6 out of 20 remaining. Their leader, Garling, was maimed, his limbs severed. Darkrai continued to shroud Mihawk in darkness. The celestial dragons, who had enjoyed 800 years of luxury, were pulled down from their pedestals today. This will be the darkest day in their history. It's almost enough. Any more, and the world government would be truly finished, plunging the world into chaos. What had been done so far was good enough. The world government still existed. The Navy hadn't lost any significant power. The member countries and pirates wouldn't dare act out too much, fearing the world government's retribution. But the Pokémon Alliance had achieved unparalleled success. From now on, no one would dare challenge the Pokémon Alliance's authority. As the scale of Pokémon continued to expand and their presence spread widely, the existence of pirates would be effectively nullified. They wouldn't dare to oppress ordinary people who had gained power. Most other criminal elements would gradually disappear. The Revolutionary Army could then proceed with large-scale liberation efforts, saving countless islands and nations from the tyranny of nobles, allowing the common people to become wealthier and purchase Pokémon for their protection. Eventually, the world government would be dismantled and the Navy would be reformed. A new era of Pokémon would fully begin, with trainers becoming the mainstream. The Navy would uphold a new sense of justice and maintain peace across the seas. Dak would then bring the member nations under the Alliance's jurisdiction. A unified world. The world of One Piece would essentially be transformed into a semi-Pokémon world. All that remained was the passage of time. Darkrai, take the slaves with us. It's time to leave. Dak called off the battle. Darkrai retracted the Dark Dome, absorbing countless slaves into the dark space, putting them to sleep. Sceptile quickly retreated, leaping into the space door Dak had opened. Giratina used Shadow Sneak to disappear from the surface world. Mihawk fell silent in an instant. When the darkness lifted, revealing the ravaged landscape, the five elders realized their master, Lord Emu, had already used the celestial dragon's Uranus power, but hadn't been enough to break Darkrai's Dark Dome. The five elders' clothing was tattered. Though they were unharmed, they looked extremely disheveled. It took all five of them to block a single weakened meteor shower from Giratina, courtesy of Darkrai. Such was the power of Giratina, surpassing the entire world of One Piece. As Arceus's third son, Giratina had even managed to defeat his siblings, Dialga and Palkia, in the original story. Even if Giratina used the reverse world's power to achieve this, it still showcased his immense strength. Why could Dialga manipulate time and Palkia manipulate space, but Giratina couldn't use the reverse world? Even in his altered form, Giratina's true level was 85, more than enough to crush the entire world of One Piece. This was why Dak, after obtaining Giratina, no longer viewed the world government as a threat. Now, Mariewa was in ruins. Everywhere the eye could see was destruction. Broken walls littered the cloudscape, not a single intact building in sight. The streets were filled with the bodies of celestial dragons, some killed by slaves, others crushed by collapsing buildings, and some even scared to death. Out of 1,000 celestial dragons, maybe 100 could still be gathered. Even if they could, most of them were likely crippled. The Knights of God were decimated, with only 6 out of 20 remaining. One had lost both arms, another was just a torso. Their leader, Garling, had lost an eye. The remaining 3 survived, less scathed, due to their unique abilities. As for the elite world government troops and CP members stationed in Mariewa, most were dead. The 10,000-strong force had been reduced to a handful who would no longer serve the world government. The celestial dragons were now in name only. How long the world government could last depended on the remaining individuals and their decisions. The only significant forces left for the world government were Emu, the 5 elders, the Knights of God, and the celestial dragon Uranus. And perhaps the former fleet admiral, Kong, who commanded the 3 armies against the Revolutionary Army. Though their numbers were few, they still constituted the world's foremost power, albeit not much stronger than the Navy. It was challenging to completely eradicate an 800-year-old regime. Had Dak not brought such overwhelming power through Pokémon, the world government's near-millennial reign might never have been toppled by Luffy and his friends. Moreover, Luffy would have faced new powerful forces like the Pacifistas and Seraphims. There was no doubt that One Piece's long narrative had reached a point where many new and old characters had become incongruous. End of Chapter 142. Chapter 142, congratulations to the host for completing the hidden main storyline. Rewrite the world. One Piece. Reward. Random max-level Pokemon from the current world. If this Pokemon has its own species, the species will also be brought to Pokémon Island. Randomly selected Pokemon species X3. Received. Lapras LV. 100. Pokémon Island obtained species. Lapras, current population 50 Lapras. Pokémon Island obtained species. Zangus, current population 100 Zangus. Pokémon Island obtained species. Seviper, current population 50 Seviper. Pokémon Island obtained species. Braviary, current population 20 Braviary, 20 Rufflet. Dak, who had just returned to the Pokémon breeding house with 3 Pokémon from Mariewa, widened his eyes in surprise upon hearing the system notification. This was an incredible surprise. The last time he had received such a notification was when he recruited his first male employee, Bon Clay, and his first female employee, Robin, which had rewarded him with 1,000 Pokecoins. First of all, a max-level Lapras, which was extremely exciting. Lapras, a water/ice-type Pokemon, is a gentle and peaceful Pokemon with a beautiful voice, known for singing with its companions on the sea. In the original translation, it is also known as the transport Pokemon. However, due to its gentle nature, it is often hunted by illegal poachers or attacked by Sharpedo, leading to a drastic decrease in its population. In the Pokemon world, Lapras is considered a rare Pokemon. Obtaining a max-level Lapras would typically cost tens of thousands of Pokecoins in the Pokemon Mall. Such a high-level Lapras would either be very old or have exceptionally high potential. A max-level Lapras was equivalent to Dak being given tens of thousands of Pokecoins for free, especially since the Pokemon breeding house planned to open another branch in Sabati Archipelago. It needed a powerful Pokemon to oversee it. Originally, Dak planned to save enough Pokecoins to buy a max-level Pokemon or a high-level one. Now, it seemed he could save that money. Additionally, this max-level Lapras came with a large group of 50 Lapras. 50 Pokemon might not sound like much, but it depends on the species. For a rare Pokemon like Lapras, A group of 50 is likely the largest Lapras population in the Pokemon world. Next, there's a mix of excitement and concern with Zangoose and Seviper. Some Pokemon in the Pokemon world naturally dislike each other due to ancient bloodline feuds. Zangoose and Seviper are such Pokemon. In the Sinnoh chapters, these two species frequently fought. If only one species had arrived, Dak would have been thrilled because both are strong fighters. But having both together, he couldn't imagine what would happen in the Pokemon Alliance City. Dak had already decided they needed to be separated. Additionally, Dak found something peculiar. Zangoose is typically a social species, often traveling in small groups to maximize their combat effectiveness, similar to Weevil. But usually, their groups are small due to frequent internal conflicts over food and status. Seviper, on the other hand, is solitary, treacherous, and untrusting of even their own kind. Typically, Seviper hunts alone, and each has its own tactics to counter two Zangoose. Now, both anomalies were present in these species. Dak felt something strange and needed to investigate. Lastly, the arrival of Braviary and Rufflet was excellent. Their characteristics are evident from their names. Braviary, known as the valiant Pokemon in ancient times, is courageous, proud, and fearless, valuing their companions highly, willing to sacrifice their lives for them. Due to their fearless nature, they never back down from a fight and carry scars proudly, earning respect within their group. Such Pokemon are very righteous and are often seen as companions of heroic figures in the Pokemon world. This was why Dak was so pleased. Braviary naturally appeals to trainers, inspiring more people on Pokemon Island to become trainers. This is like being given hundreds of thousands of Pokecoins for free. Dak's smile nearly reached his ears. There had always been plans to introduce various Pokemon species to Pokemon Island, but due to prioritizing the development of Alliance City, this plan was repeatedly postponed. This reward advanced Dak's plans significantly. Even though the variety of species still seemed limited, it was sufficient for the current state of Pokemon Island. How many people live on Pokemon Island now? Or rather, how many people live in Alliance City, which currently has a population of 5,000? Among them, there are already about 2,000 Pokemon. The addition of these wild Pokemon now constitutes a significant proportion. It will also help the residents of Alliance City adapt to the concept of wild Pokemon, potentially forming friendships and partnerships with these wild Pokemon. However, I need to quickly resolve the issue between Zangoose and Seviper before things escalate. Dak was a bit worried. The sudden appearance of Zangoose and Seviper might lead to a fight, and if they accidentally hurt the nearby Braviary, it might drag them into the conflict as well. As for Lapras, that's highly unlikely. They are naturally gentle. Upon returning to the Pokemon breeding house, Sceptile promptly returned to guard the branch in Water 7. Darkrai glanced at Dak, wanting to remind him that his dark space still held a group of people. But seeing how anxious Dak was, he refrained from speaking and silently merged into Dak's shadow. When Dak arrived at Pokemon Island, he found that the situation hadn't escalated as badly as he had feared. But it was close. On the 1,000-meter arch bridge in front of the Alliance base, the Pokemon groups had appeared. The Zangoose group and the Seviper group stood on opposite sides of the bridge. If the terrain wasn't so unsuitable, with the fear of falling into the water, they would have already started fighting. Even the mere presence of the other group was seen as arrogance. In their eyes, even the other species breathing was an affront. The peace-loving Lapras group called out softly from the lake on both sides of the bridge, acting as peacemakers, trying to calm both groups. Braviary, along with Rufflet, perched on the railings, observing with a none-of-our-business attitude. Meanwhile, more people and Pokemon were gathering on land to watch, with some even starting to take sides and place bets. Cat lovers supported Zangoose, snake lovers supported Seviper, and most people were just there for the spectacle. Damn Sevipers, I'll personally deal with you. Damn Zangoose, I'll personally deal with you. Just as the Zangoose and Seviper were about to clash, Dak arrived. He descended from the sky, landing between the two groups, and raised his hands to stop them. Woo! The Lapras greeted Dak with respectful and affectionate cries. With the system's assistance, Dak had already formed a basic bond with their leader, giving him a certain status within the Lapras group. The other three groups had also roughly understood the situation upon arriving at Pokémon Island, so they greeted Dak. They didn't have to obey Dak completely, but basic respect was necessary. What's going on here? Dak wasn't asking why the two groups were fighting, but about their strange social structure. This was beyond normal behavior. Pokémon generally wouldn't break their species habits unless absolutely necessary. The leaders of the Zangoose and Seviper groups exchanged glances, each explaining their perspective. With Darkrai and his psychic abilities, Dak quickly understood the situation. These two groups were longtime enemies. Both originated from the slopes of Mt. Coronet in the Sinnoh region. Initially, there were normal Zangoose and Seviper scattered across the slopes. Usually, each Zangoose and Seviper had their own rivals, rarely interfering with each other's battles. But due to an accident, the Zangoose leader saved a young Zangoose from a Seviper, gradually expanding his team beyond his control. The Seviper leader, seeing his old rival growing stronger, couldn't tolerate it. Other Sevipers, who initially didn't want to group together, realized they had no choice when faced with large groups of Zangoose. These two species seemed bound by some fate, even arriving on Pokémon Island together. You will live separately. Dak didn't have any immediate solution, deciding to use the geography of Alliance City to keep the two species apart. End of Chapter 143. Chapter 143. Dak decided to place the Zangoose and Seviper tribes outside the Alliance City. One tribe on the west side, the other on the east side. Dak planned to set up a forest around the outskirts of the Alliance City as a natural protective barrier, while the south would be developed into suburbs with small villages as the southern border of the city. Acting swiftly, Dak led the Zangoose and Seviper tribes to the far west and east sides of the Alliance City. Both tribes thrive in forest environments, where they can hunt and camouflage themselves using the terrain. Dak used the remaining 160,000 Pokecoins from his system to create two 80,000 square meter forests on the west and east sides. These forests included lakes connected to the northern inland sea. The forest would eventually grow beyond this initial size as people planted more trees and expanded them. For now, the current scale was sufficient for the Zangoose and Seviper tribes to claim their territories and return to their natural behaviors. The trees included many common Pokémon World fruit trees, providing food for the Pokémon living there. Dak also planned to introduce small animals like pheasants, rabbits, field mice, squirrels, snakes, frogs, and insects to create a balanced ecosystem and food source for the carnivorous Pokémon. Both the Zangoose and Seviper tribes were satisfied with their new habitats and entered the forests after expressing their gratitude to Dak. They would undoubtedly engage in internal conflicts to establish territories, as that's their nature. In the future, some may cross the Alliance City to stir trouble in the other forest, but that would be at least a month away. Even if conflicts arose, Dak wouldn't intervene, as having natural enemies keeps them vigilant and prevents uncontrolled population growth. After resolving the Zangoose and Seviper tribe placements, Dak turned his attention to the other two tribes. The Lapras tribe was easy to accommodate. The sea around the Alliance base was their natural home, safe and quiet, and they would undoubtedly love it. Dak would arrange for people to capture various marine creatures and introduce them into the lake. This lake, like the one at the main breeding house, had special properties allowing marine life to thrive. The One Piece world was abundant with marine creatures of countless species, so there was no shortage. Dak even considered contacting Fishman Island to help gather aquatic plants and deep-sea fish for the Lapras tribe. For now, the Alliance would provide food, which wouldn't be too costly with the abundance of street vendors in Water 7. Braviary's tribe was a bit more complicated. They typically lived on mountain peaks or in snowy regions, neither of which were currently available. They had to temporarily settle in Alliance City. Fortunately, Braviary and Rufflet were not picky about their environment and enjoyed lively atmospheres. Alliance City was currently the only bustling place on Pokémon Island, making it a perfect temporary home for them. With the 4 Pokémon tribes temporarily settled, Dak returned to the breeding house to meet his new partner. He wasn't worried about the Pokémon tribes attacking the residents of Alliance City. These Pokémon came from a world where humans and Pokémon coexisted peacefully. As long as humans didn't provoke them or invade their territories, they wouldn't attack. Back in the breeding house, Dak was excited. A max-level Lapras. Dak, there were some noises coming from your room earlier. It sounded like something was calling. Yes, that's my new partner. Dak responded excitedly and rushed to his bedroom. Opening the door, he was greeted by a huge cutie. While a typical Lapras stand around 2.5 meters tall, young or female Lapras may be shorter. However, this Lapras was a towering 5 meters tall. A Pokémon size is influenced by age, gender, and strength. For instance, Sceptile's age made it average size for its species, but it was 0.4 meters taller due to its strength. This Lapras was twice the size of its kin, indicating not only immense power, but also significant age. Lapras are also naturally heavy. At the moment, Dak's bed was crushed under its weight, and the bedding was soaked due to Lapra's hydration ability, which kept its body moist, secreting pure water. "Hello, Lapras." Dak quickly approached and hugged Lapra's long neck. Lapras are incredibly gentle Pokémon, so Dak felt safe embracing it upon their first meeting. This was unlike the previous 3 Pokémon, known for their fearsome reputations. Giratina and Darkrai, with their titles as the Renegade Pokémon and Pitch Black Pokémon, respectively, were intimidating. Sceptile wasn't feared, but was known for being proud and aloof, rarely showing kindness to the weak. Lapra is gently called, tapping its large feet and swishing its tail. To Dak, Lapra's actions were adorable, and he hugged its neck tighter, cool and soft. Lapras smiled gently, sensing Dak's affection, and reciprocated. Lapras naturally liked others, similar to a golden retriever that loves humans. However, unlike golden retrievers that may be aggressive towards other dogs, Lapras remain gentle even towards other Pokémon. "Let's go get you checked up." Dak eagerly led Lapras to the manufacturing room for a checkup. Despite its size, Lapras weighed around 500 kilograms. For people in the One Piece world, this weight was manageable. Dak, no longer a weakling, could easily lift Lapras with some help from his psychic abilities. Lapras was surprised that Dak could lift it, but quickly became happy. A strong trainer was a good thing. In the manufacturing room, Lapras greeted Monet, Gardevoir, and Porygon-Z. Monet was used to Dak bringing in powerful Pokémon and was just happy to see another strong member join the Pokémon Alliance. Based on her observations, Dak only brought exceptionally strong Pokémon for checkups. Lapras was undoubtedly one of them. Lapras type: water, ice, ability, hydration, potential, purple, height, 5.0 meters, weight, 500 kilograms, age, 650, level, Elvini moves, Hydro Pump, Perish Song, Sheer Cold, Blizzard, Ice Beam, Hyper Beam. Lapras was indeed old, almost 3 times Sceptile's age. Congratulations to Sceptile for gaining an Elder. However, Lapra's potential was slightly lower than Sceptile's, so despite being younger, Sceptile had the same level due to its superior potential and training. Lapras and Sceptile were comparable in strength within the Pokémon world, lacking the special abilities of legendary Pokémon, but with matching levels. This meant that Lapras should be on par with the top fighters in this world, scoring a perfect 100 out of 100. Lapras would likely excel in this world, especially with its aquatic environment. Sceptile might have more opportunities to shine in a different world, like the Naruto world. Let's take you to Pokémon Island for a while. Dak was thrilled. He could now ride Lapras across the sea. With Giratina in the sky and Lapras in the sea, Dak almost didn't need to walk. You'll stay at the Water 7 branch from now on. The city has many canals and friendly people, making it perfect for you. Dak had decided. Lapras would guard the Water 7 branch. Lapras loved peaceful environments, and Water 7 was perfect, especially with the Pokémon Alliance presence. Sceptile would be stationed at Sabaody Archipelago. That chaotic place, full of troublemakers, would provide Sceptile with plenty of challenges and excitement. Sceptile was bored in Water 7, with few opportunities for action. Everyone knew a major figure in Sabeti Archipelago could go toe-to-toe with Sceptile, being even stronger than Mihawk, and also a swordsman. Dak would inform Sceptile of this person's location. End of Chapter 144. Chapter 144. Shirahoshi counted the days on her fingers. She had been on Pokémon Island for a total of 7 scattered days. She watched as the Alliance City grew from empty to slightly populated. However, none of the residents of Alliance City knew that a mermaid princess from Fishman Island was hiding in the inland sea next to them. Sometimes Shirahoshi would come over by herself, and perhaps only the person who brought her to Pokémon Island knew she had arrived. Most of the time, Shirahoshi would dive into the inland sea and play with her 2 friends. Her friends were Phoeba and Magikarp. Shirahoshi's natural, high-water type affinity made all...
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.